Good evening and welcome. I am Councillor Dennis Pennyworth, Chairman of the Western Area Planning Committee. The members of the committee joining me this evening are Councillors Adrian Abbs, Phil Barnett, James Cole, Caroline Culver, Lynn Docherty, Clive Hooker, Claire Rolls and Tony Vickers, who's the Vice Chairman. Though we have a Cole here this evening, the usual one, Hilary, is no longer a member of this committee, and I'd just like at the top of the meeting to publicly thank her for her hard work over her many years of service to Western Area Planning. I move on to the officers who are attending to advise and support the meeting. We have the team leader of the Western Area Planning Committee, Mr. Simon Till, senior planning officers, Mrs. Lydia Mather and Mr. Masi Masiwa, Highways Officer, Mr. Paul Goddard, Legal Advisor, Mrs. Kim Ma, the Clerk, Mr. Jack Karimi, and our Zoom host, Mrs. Vicky Yule. Before we start, I'd like to explain for the benefit of those watching that tonight's meeting is being held both over Zoom and with councillors present and COVID compliant in the council chamber. As those present in the chamber are socially distanced, they're permitted to remove their masks while seated. Representatives making a presentation to the committee have been encouraged to do so remotely via Zoom, but those here in person are equally welcome. The meeting is also being live streamed on YouTube. Do members have any questions about the way in which this meeting will be conducted before we proceed? Councillor Abbs.
Yes, thank you very much, Chairman. Obviously, one of the applications we have before us this evening is going to be quite interesting, the first one. And I'd really like, through the chair, if I may, to ask legal to give us her reading on exactly, because we are a semi-judicial function here and so on, and the Constitution and so on talks about the perception of the public of bias and so on and so forth, what her advice would be to members of the executive who may be present and who may be wishing to take part in the particular, in a basically sponsored application from the council itself. What would the position be, please? The advice be, rather. So.
Thank you, Councillor Abbs. Mrs. Ma.
Members must take a personal decision. It's an individual decision, and it's down to them to determine whether they may be prejudiced or biased in any way. It's not for us to decide. There is a different mechanism outside of this forum.
No, my question was, what advice would you give such a person?
Advice in what way? Sorry.
Well, normally if there's any question mark, we're always told to come to legal to get some kind of advice on whether or not what we should do within a meeting, whether we might be prejudiced. On licensing, if I think I'm exposed, I go along, I talk to legal and say, we'd rather you not.
Typically that's done in advance of the meeting. It has to be escalated to the monitoring officer. We have had somebody do that for this particular meeting. And then the monitoring officer is Ms. Clark, and she would advise if there's any kind of sort of technicalities on that. Otherwise, if it's just a standard situation where you may have an interest, that would be down to yourself to make that decision. But if you have a concern about it, you would address it.
My concern is one of reputational damage to the council, and of course the ability to be taken to court as a result of it for potential bias that might be perceived. I'm not saying that there isn't. I'm not pointing any fingers at anybody. I'm looking for advice really from legal.
Well, all I can say is that we have had members come forward. We do historically have members come forward with the same concerns that you've raised, and Sarah has dealt with those concerns.
Then, Chairman, I would like to, before the declarations of interest are made, to propose that should this first application be minded to be approved by members, and obviously we're a long way to go before we get there, if either way, that this be actually taken up to district planning because of the nature of the application and the applicant.
Okay, I'll put that to Mr. Till, I think.
Thank you, Chairman. Members, I should remind you that the applications for a site at Faraday Road, which involved considerations of similar issues to this application, were recently approved by the Western Area Planning Committee. No requirement for referral of those applications was made. Now, in this particular case, I note that the council is the applicant, and perhaps that is Councillor Abbs' concern, but in respect of the council as applicants, the council fulfills a different function as applicants, the local planning authority, and the two are separated. So in that particular respect, I would consider that there was no particular exceptional circumstance to require this to be taken to the District Planning Committee. But if members feel differently, then they can, of course, at the end of the debate, propose a motion to consider deferral to the District Planning Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Pilden. Mrs. Marr, from a legal perspective, you're content with that?
Yes, but obviously we need to hear
Sure.
the entire.
Certainly. Okay, Councillor Abbs, thank you very much indeed. Okay, on to item 1, members. Apologies. Mr. Creamy, do we have any apologies for tonight's meeting, please?
Yes, we've received apologies from Councillors Wollaston and Cant. Councillors Doherty and James Cole are substituting for them respectively.
Thank you very much. Moving on to item 2 now, the minutes of the last meeting. I've got minutes for the 13th of October. Members, do you have any observations of those, please? I see no hands. So I'd like to propose they are a true record. Does that find a second, please? Councillor Hooker, thank you. Members in favour? And I note that we have Councillor Barnett not present, Councillor Cole not present.
Me not
Councillor
present.
Rolls
It was my
and-
birthday, Chairman. I had better things to do.
Councillor Rolls and Doherty also not present. Thank you very much. Thank you, Jack.
Chairman, could I just welcome Councillor Rowles back to the committee as well? You beat me to it thanking Councillor Cole, but I think we should welcome Councillor Rowles back as well.
Very,
you
very
very
well
much.
said, Councillor Culver. Welcome back. It feels as though you've never been away.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you. Thank you, members.
And I hope you have a long and happy stay at Western area. Item number 3, declarations of interest. Members, I've just got the one set there, Councillor Hooker. I think they'll come back to the next meeting. Thank you. Declarations of interest. Now, I'll work around the room on this one because I think there'll be quite a few of those. If I can go in a clockwise direction, Councillor Hooker, please.
Chairman, on item 4.1 of the agenda, I'd like to declare a personal interest. My interest is personal, not prejudicial or disclosable pecuniary interest. And I will remain to take part in the debate, and I will vote on this matter, and I have been lobbied.
Thank you, Councillor Hooker. Councillor Doherty?
Thank you, Chairman. I confirm that in relation to agenda item 4.1, I have been lobbied by residents. As leader of the executive, I have been party to conversations relating to the proposed development, which has on occasion included Sports England. However, I am not and never have been the lead executive member for this project. I confirm that as a member of this committee, I will be considering this application solely on its planning merits, having regard to the officer's report and any further relevant information presented to the meeting this evening. And I shall form a view on that basis. I've taken advice from the monitoring officer, and I'm satisfied that in the circumstances, I am able to participate and vote on this matter.
Councillor Dockley. Councillor Rose?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I've been lobbied in respect of 4.1. I'm also one of the ward members in respect of 4.2. I just wanted to highlight also that I have attended a meeting between Sovereign and Hungerford Town Council, which was purely information gathering. I therefore will be taking will be participating in the debate and the vote tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rose. Councillor Vickers?
Yes, Chairman. I'm a member of Newbury Town Council, whose strategy is well known. And as a member of that council, I share the views of that council. So I regard myself as being predisposed, but not predetermined. As I'm not in full possession of the facts of this particular application, I will consider it on its merits. And of course, I have been lobbied because it's in my ward.
I'm surprised if you hadn't been. Councillor Culver.
Thank you, Chairman. I've been lobbied on item 1 and I'm also the ward member for item 3, but I will be making my decision tonight based on the evidence presented before us and the debate that ensues. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Culver. Councillor Abs.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I am the Green and Parish Council Chairman of Planning. So this application did come across our desk for a brief look at least once before. I think it came across the other week as well. So I should declare that. Anything I look at this evening will be with a fresh pair of eyes and evidence presented to me this evening. Of course, as a ward member where item 1 is based, I have been heavily lobbied, I would say, on the subject, and will look to speak to that during the actual slot that I have available for that. And what else? No, I think that's it for now.
Councillor Cole.
Thank you, Chairman. I confirm that in relation to agenda item 4.2, I am also one of the ward members for Hungerford and Kimbry, where the application site is located. In my capacity as ward member, I've been interested in this application. I spoke at the meeting of Hungerford Town Council when the application was considered there. I also participated in the sovereign session, and I've taken advice from the monitoring officer. I confirm that I, too, will be forming a fresh view on this application this evening. Based on all the information before this meeting, it is therefore my intention to participate in the debate and to vote on this item.
Thank you, Councillor Cole. And finally, Councillor Barnett.
Thank you, Chairman. I am a patient and a member of the PPG at Falkland Surgery, next door to the application of the rugby club. I'm also a member of Green and Parish Council and a member of Newby Town Council, and also Newby Town Council Planning and Highways Committee, where this particular application of the rugby club was discussed. But tonight I shall weigh up all the relevant information and vote accordingly.
Thank you very much, Councillor Barnett. And for the record, I'd like to state that I've been lobbied on the first and third applications, and like Councillors Rolls and Cole, a ward member for Hungerford and Kimbry, I have sat in on planning meetings with Hungerford Town Council when this has been discussed. But I shall be, like them, making full contribution to the meeting and voting at the end of the debate. Okay, moving on to item number 4 of the agenda. For those of you who are new to the meeting, I'll briefly explain how this works. Officers will make a presentation, will present the application to the committee, after which the following groups might wish to make representations for a maximum of 5 minutes. That's the parish or town council representative, then the objector, supporter, applicant and or agent, and finally the ward members. Following this, the committee members will have the opportunity to ask questions of clarification of the speakers and officers. The committee will then debate the application and vote on the decision. Now, we have 3 applications on the agenda for this evening, starting with the first of those. Mr. Masiwa, would you begin your presentation, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, everyone. I'll just share my screen. Can everyone see that clearly?
I've got your front sheet there, front slide there, Mr. Masiwa.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have an update sheet for members on this first item. Firstly, the update sheet seeks to provide a bit of clarity following some queries at the committee site visits. One of which was the walking duration from Newbury College car park to the site. As can be seen and explained in the update sheet, officers have checked the walking distance and duration again, and we are content that the 12 minutes reference in the committee report is acceptable as for the purposes of assessing the proposed development. The duration does take varying times depending on pace, as well as the starting points and the finishing points. So we estimate between 12 minutes and 16 minutes. Since the publication of the committee report, we've received an additional consultation response from Greenham Parish Council. This was following reconsultation after additional information was submitted, and they maintained their objection, as indicated in the report, in the update sheet. In terms of the conditions, there is an amendment to condition 2, which is approved plans. On this condition, the joint statement by West Berkshire Council and Sport England, which was listed in the approved plans and documents, has been removed, and it has been added as an informative, which is also included in the update sheet. The reason, Mr. Chairman, is that it's been concluded that the inclusion of the joint statement might lead to a misunderstanding for members of the planning committee in terms of whether they're being asked to consider Monks Lane as a replacement for Faraday Road's site, rather than as a site with the potential to be brought forward to replace the Faraday Road site. As such, Mr. Chairman, in this particular case, the material planning consideration is the West Berkshire playing pitch strategy and its requirements, and not the joint statement that was submitted. There is also an amendment to condition 10. The highways officer has recommended a revision to parts C and D, and that's just really to clarify the requirements on that condition for additional parking. So that's the update sheet, Mr. Chairman. Following the update sheet, the recommendation remains that for approval, subject to conditions within the report and the stated conditions as amended in the update sheet, and the informative that has been added in the update sheet as well. I'll start the presentation.
Thank you very much.
Members, this application before you this evening seeks full planning permission for the construction of a new 3G artificial grass pitch, a single-story sports pavilion with changing rooms, facilities, a community function room. The proposal also includes installation of floodlighting, associated parking, fencing, storage areas, and a spectator stand. The new community facility will be available for rugby, football, and other sports activities. As indicated, objections were received from Greenham Parish Council. We've also received objections from Newbury Town Council. There are no other objections from statutory or technical consultees, and conditions are as recommended within the report and update sheet. The reason the application is presented to committee this evening is it was called in by the ward member for the committee members to review the parking allocation for the proposed new use. And as indicated, the recommendation is for approval. The site, Mr. Chairman and members, is located south of Monks Lane. This is Monks Lane. The site is outlined in red in the slide, and is accessed on the eastern side of the access road, which is currently the home of Newbury Rugby Football Club, a David Lloyd Fitness Centre, Wash Common Pharmacy, and Falkland Grange Care Home, as well as a GP surgery. The site lies adjacent to a biodiversity opportunity area, which is to the south, this location. The area is consistent with numerous designated ancient woodlands and local wildlife sites. The site is currently a rugby pitch with a hard-standing overflow car park area to the west. The wider site provides additional local rugby pitch provision to a large number of participants, including youth players. The proposed development members will consist of approximately 400 square meters of internal floor space in the pavilion. Is that slide there, which measures approximately 34 meters in length and 12.9 meters in width. It will have a height of approximately 4.4 meters to the roof ridge height. As indicated on the plans, it will consist of 4 changing rooms, a medical room, officials room, plant room, a boardroom, a kitchen servery, which is here, and a sitting area. It is submitted that the proposed kitchen and servery area will be a reheat only. As such, it is not expected that large kitchen equipment will be installed. This slide just shows the proposed elevations of the pavilion. A spectator sitting stand is also proposed to the north of the site, and this will accommodate approximately 268 spectators. And that's the stand plans and elevations shown on your screen. The proposal also includes the construction of an open steel mesh ball stop fence, entrance gates around the entire pitch. The fencing will be constructed with a height of approximately 4.5 meters above ground level. The proposed floodlighting system comprises of 6 columns, 6 floodlights. They are shown on the slides that you can see. So we've got floodlights here, here, there, here, and behind the stand, and the 6th one there. Each column mounted with 2 LED luminaires at a height of approximately 15 meters. The proposal, Mr. Chairman, will provide 51 car parking spaces plus 2 disabled spaces, a cycle parking area. In the event that parking demand exceeds the total provision, the applicant submits that the rugby club currently will provide approximately 280 spaces for use as an overflow. The proposed development is submitted to allow provision for future Football League promotions. As indicated in the report, members, promotions would likely lead to increased demand and attendances and increased parking demand. In the event that the predicted attendance increases, the applicant submits that they have an agreement for an additional 150 parking spaces from Newbury College on a regular basis for all home matches. As indicated in the introduction, officers consider that the walking distance from Newbury College car park is approximately 12 minutes. A condition has been recommended, members, outlining that no football or rugby matches can take place on the same day on the site. This would ensure that any overflow parking at the rugby club is made available for all football matches. The applicant also submits that this can be accommodated with the relevant league programming authority. For the purposes of this application, members, the relevant policy is policy CS 18 of the core strategy, which defines green infrastructure as including all outdoor sports facilities. Policy CS 18 states that all outdoor sports facilities will be protected and enhanced. New developments will make provision for high quality and multifunctional open spaces of an appropriate size. And the proposal is considered by officers to provide an equal or greater size and standard of playing pitch provision to the existing. The Newbury Vision 2026 to 2036 sets out the district and town councils, both of them, and the community aspirations for the future of Newbury. The document does indicate support for growth of recreation and sporting facilities within Newbury and the preservation and enhancement of the open spaces. In 2020, the council adopted its own playing pitch strategy, which amongst other matters promotes the provision of sports pitches. Sport England as a statutory consultee has been consulted. In turn, they have consulted the Football Association, the Football Foundation, the Rugby Football Union on the proposed development before arriving at their statutory position of no objection, subject to conditions. The next slide just shows the proposed site with the building and the car parking. The next slide, members, just shows the site, the proposed 3G pitch, the parking, and the additional planting in terms of biodiversity enhancements as part of the development. So as you can see, there's additional planting around the site to create corridors that link into the wildlife sites, which are to the south as previously indicated. And on this plan, you can also see the rugby club and the rugby club car park, which is to the south. I'll just go through quickly some of the site photographs just to refresh everyone's memory. This is a view of Monks Lane looking east from the access, and the site boundary can be seen here with the vegetation, and that's the location of the site notice. Again, from the access onto Monks Lane, there is a pedestrian crossing point on Monks Lane near the access. This image shows the proposed site. It was previously used as an overflow car park for the rugby club, I believe when they were playing higher leagues. But my understanding is that it's not being used at the moment. Again, this is the car park, and this is the location where the proposed car park will be constructed. Again, a view from within the site, looking at the existing gates, the Monks Lane access, and the surgery. Again, just showing the surgery and the relationship to the site. This image from within the site looks towards Falkland Grange Care Home, which is this building here, and David Lloyd Gym Facility, which is this building here. This view is looking to the north towards Monks Lane, shows the boundary of the site, the vegetation. I think you can just have glimpses of the residential properties which are on the other side of Monks Lane. Again, the northern boundary with some glimpses of the residential properties. This slide just shows the existing grass pitch. As you can see, it's an existing rugby pitch. And again, the adjacent rugby pitches, which are being retained. Again, this shows a bit clearer the adjacent rugby pitches, which are being retained, and floodlighting that exists within those pitches. This slide shows the rugby club, the main rugby club pitch, the rugby club clubhouse and stand. The site boundary for the proposed development is around here. So this is where the 3G pitch is located. Again, just indicating the location of the proposed development. It's going to be in this area, and that's the main rugby pitch and the rugby clubhouse. Again, this is just a view towards the site from the south, looking beyond the main rugby pitch. Just an image of the rugby club car park. This image was taken on midweek morning. It just gives an idea to members about the parking if that comes up in debate. Again, just showing the car parking. That's the end of the presentation, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Masiwa. I'll now move on to highways. Mr. Goddard, do you have any comments you'd like to make on this application, please?
Good evening, Chairman, members. Yes, please. Your highway officers raise no objection to this proposal overall. Your highway officers are satisfied with the proposed layout of the proposal. However, further work is required on pedestrian routes through to the building. And that's subject to some submitted amended drawings, which can be provided and easily resolve this issue. And that's secured with condition 8. Highway officers also have no concerns about traffic generation, because this use will mainly be during weekday evenings, outside of weekday travel periods, and will also take place over weekends. The most significant issue that has been subject to many concerns from local people is the provision of parking. The proposal has been provided with 51 car parking spaces, and there is access to a further 280 spaces subject to the rugby club just to the south of the site. To talk further, let's discuss where the clubs are now, including the rugby club. The rugby club obviously isn't subject to this planning application, but it's interesting to see where they are, and it has some bearing on your considerations, I think. About 10, 15 years ago, the club was flying quite high and was playing in much higher leagues than where they are now. They were attracting some 3,000 to 5,000 spectators on some of their matches. Nowadays, playing in lower leagues, they're attracting about a tenth of that number, about 300 to 500. The football club is attracting, so I'm told, about 30 to 50 spectators. Therefore, between the two clubs, I'm confident that there is enough parking in the location, considering where the clubs are at the moment. The question is, what happens if the football club receives promotion in the years to follow, which would be very good for the club and very good for the town? At the moment, the club is playing at around the football grounds of different grades, which they then have different capacities. They're currently around step 7, but the ground that's been designed is before you tonight is designed at a much higher step 4 level, which could accommodate up to 1,900 people. Therefore, your highway officers have sought a number of conditions. The first condition is condition 9, that limits the playing of rugby matches alongside football matches. And that's quite a common practice, that matches do not take place at the same time. A further condition we've applied is condition 10. which is, and if I just get it up, which I will go into in quite some detail. Just bear with me. Okay, the latest version is on your update sheet. And should the football club be promoted sometime in the future, there will need to be parking beat surveys on the streets listed at the top of that condition. And the condition also specifies when those surveys should take place. Should issues be found from those parking surveys, then there would be a consultation process with residents funded by the applicant on whether weighting restrictions should be provided in some or all of those streets. Should the response of residents be negative to any weighting restrictions proposal, then the issue is considered accepted. Obviously, isn't much of an issue for residents to be concerned about. However, if the residents find support, then the council will implement any weighting restrictions required with the funding that's been received. Why is the weighting restrictions being applied first? Because I'm not entirely convinced that spectators are going to walk the 1.2 kilometres from the Newbury College parking that has been mentioned to you tonight, when there could be streets closer where spectators could park. So if we have the weighting restrictions, we can then apply the other measures that are listed below. And that includes the provision of a travel plan, the provision of parking in the Newbury College as proposed, and the provision of a shuttle bus to take people from the college car park to the ground. And then finally, all of the above measured, should they ever be provided, would then be reviewed after 5 years. The reason to have that review is that, well, the club could perhaps be demoted once again and the measures are no longer required. Or perhaps the weighting restrictions need to be amended in some ways, because over the years, maybe the traffic, the parking's spread to other locations, etc. So it is quite a complicated condition, but your highway officers, I feel, have looked into the issue and the concerns of parking that has been raised. And I hope that we've come up with some solutions to the concerns raised. Thank you, Chairman.
And thank you very much, Mr. Goddard. We're now going to move on to our speakers on the application. And the first I have of those is Mr. Vaughan Miller. Mr. Miller, if you'd be good enough to take the stand, make sure your microphone's turned on. And when you're ready, you know you have 5 minutes. You've done this before, so no need for me to tell you. Please do.
Yeah, just that a lot of precedents mentioned earlier. It was a more relevant precedent. Was the demolition application, again, brought forward by the exec, which went to the DPC, and executive members on the DPC substituted themselves. So that's more of a relevant
Point of order,
precedent.
Chairman. I've sat through Councillor Abbs suggesting that I shouldn't be talking. You know, this is getting a little bit silly. I've made a declaration of interest, and as chairman, I expect you to actually honour that, because I feel I've made that declaration. So to have a member of Newbury Town Council question that, I find it quite inexcusable.
I will take that, Councillor.
Sorry, there's no question on anyone's integrity at all meant in that.
Okay. So then your time will begin when you start to speak. I'll give you a fair warning at 1 minute and then 10 seconds left to wrap up.
Thank you. Newbury Town Council are registering our objection to this application. We remain concerned about noise and light pollution, plus the following. Impact on trees. The trees and shrubbery bordering Monks Lane to the north of the pitch is protected green space. The plans clearly show the high fencing will go right to the very edge of this diverse space, and it's hard to believe that, especially during the build phase, there will not be any impact. Parking. The spaces available are still clearly inadequate. At the site visit, it was claimed that senior rugby and football matches could be played on alternative weekends. This would not be the case all of the time, especially for cup matches. Plus, both clubs could have second teams, which would play on the alternative weekends. So it's likely to be football and rugby played at the same time most weekends. And it is not just for games, but also for training. For kids' teams, the pitch would normally be split into 3, allowing multiple teams to train concurrently. During changeover, you could get upwards of 100 cars leaving and arriving. With the ground right at the entrance to Monks Lane, this could cause chaos, with cars either being stuck in the car park or backing up Monks Lane, and potentially dangerous, especially for kids who might be walking or cycling. This would be further exacerbated when the rugby club are training on their pitches at the same time. Size. For months, the portfolio holders stated publicly the ground would be built at step 4 level initially. We heard for the first time at the site visit that this will no longer be the case. We asked why. Scalability. The site is too small and has very limited scalability. Our strategy is that any ground should be scalable so it can grow from an initial step 4 level to higher levels up to step 1, should our team's success require it. A redeveloped Faraday Road ground can achieve this. This sports hub will condemn our clubs to never aspire to greater than step 4. Location. Monks Lane does not meet our requirements for being near the town centre, which would encourage active travel and be accessible via public transport. It also means that town businesses are unlikely to benefit from increased footfall. Key objectors. The FA and Football Foundation remain as objectors on this site, whilst the RFU have a holding objection. It is highly unusual for Sport England not to be aligned with such key national governing bodies. And indeed, Sport England are currently subject to official complaints for allowing themselves to be manipulated into a joint political statement with this administration. And yet the statement still remains on this application. Sustainability for any sports facility is a key requirement. The sports hub will not be sustainable, with losses each year of over £200,000, which of course will need to be underwritten by council administrations over the next 40 years. This is primarily down to the cost of the lease, lack of income from a proper clubhouse, and it being a shared facility, with the rugby club not sharing any of the costs. The playing pitch strategy emphasises multiple times that the ground will be wholly owned by the council. A wholly owned site with a proper clubhouse would be sustainable. To pass this application in the face of these numbers would be sheer madness. The elephant in the room, of course, is whether it's expected that the sports hub would form the replacement for Faraday Road football ground. This is another case of last-minute changes where you're now asked to consider this as a standalone application. Yet it is clear that this is seen by the administration as the replacement, with Councillor Wollaston stating publicly February's exec that they would not spend the money on this facility if it was not a replacement. We would like to see this application paused to see clarification on this new position and why it has been added at this late stage. I have seen pre-application correspondence from Sport England to the administration advising they should submit plans for the regeneration of Faraday Road concurrently with any proposed replacement site, since even the need for a replacement is dependent on the viability of the regeneration plans. This is also the position of the NTC. To conclude, our objections are many. Noise and light pollution concerns, impact to protected diverse green space.
That's 1 minute, please.
Insufficient parking, not just on game days. Site is too small and lacks scalability and ambition. The FA and Football Foundation remain as objectors and the RFU are holding. This should be very concerning. It is unsustainable to a frankly ridiculous level. This is clearly a highly controversial application, has too many unanswered questions, which could leave the council open to challenges and as such should be referred up to DPC to allow some of the key questions to be answered. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Members' questions, please. Councillor Abbs.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Councillor. Would you mind just going through how you came up with the 200k number again for me, please?
Yes, certainly. On the business case, it was £90,000 shortage. All right. Sport England's response to the business case said it was 150.
Sorry, would you mind pausing just while the chairman has his chat and is able to listen and join in on the meeting?
Thank you, Councillor Ebbs. Thank you. Please answer the question.
Sport England's response to the business case said it would be £150,000. At a recent exec, it was declared that the £3 million plus loan that was being taken out would be taken out to build this would cost around £60,000 a year to maintain. So hence £210,000 is the sort of number I have, which is 8 million, of course, over the 40 years.
Okay, so you're confident in this number that if we was to check down by officers, there should be no doubt about it.
Yeah.
Okay. I do have a second question, if I may, Chairman.
Please do.
This business of alternate weeks, you mentioned it, and I think you got it, and I'm pretty sure in the application it talks about adult matches and not having parallel adult matches. But you went on to talk about lots of other teams that might be playing, and of course that would cause a parallel game. Could you just go through that again for me, please?
Well, yes, for the rugby club, I don't believe they still have the Stags. Yeah, they still have the Stags. So they would play alternative weekends to the first team. They would play probably at home to play
so
on the main
just want
pitch.
to pause again as the chairman seems to be distracted. Okay, please carry on.
So they're a second team, if you like. Wouldn't have so many fans and stuff, but for those games. The football club used to have a second team. They can't maintain that over recent years, but likely to want to start the second team. I know there's a strong requirement from other football clubs for an under 23 side to be started to help younger people transition into the senior football. So the expectation then is they would want to play there, and therefore it's likely that while the rugby first team plays, there'll be a second team from the football playing, and probably at the same time on Saturdays. That's the time of kickoff.
So would you agree that, are you really saying that the condition that's applied at the moment, which aims to make sure there's not a parking problem, in fact wouldn't solve the issue because it only talks about adults? Is that?
Yeah, I can't see how that can be the case. And even if it was, then
I think we've heard from our highways officer, haven't we, and in his take on that, Councillor Ebbs, and
I
we
don't
can maybe
remember him
ask
saying
questions
anything
of
about junior clubs and so on at the same time.
maybe we can ask questions of clarification from Mr. Goddard
Thank you.
later in the debate. Councillor Culver.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Ebbs has touched upon what I was going to ask, actually. Are you aware of whether there are any women's teams as well that would contribute to this need to organise who can play when?
There is a Newbury ladies team. They normally play on Sundays.
And there seems to be a bit of confusion about what step is being proposed in this application this evening. I understand I've seen different things about step 4, step 5, step 6. You might not be the right person to answer this, but what is your understanding of the difference between the kind of spectatorship that you might get for a step 4, a step 5, a step 6, just so we can get a bit of an idea in our head about the different scales that we're talking about?
I'd probably defer that question to Mr. McDougall, I think, who's with the football group and more experience on that.
Thank you, Councillor Culver. Councillor Baker, sorry, Councillor Barnett, I do apologise.
Yeah, through you, Chairman. I think that perhaps asked some similar question regarding the concurrent operation. So, you did touch on this parking, and I'm obviously going to question Mr. Goddard explained, but did make a comment about inadequate parking. I don't know whether you'd like to sort of elaborate on what.
Yeah, just that with the parking, particularly there's parking issues around match times, but more around training, I think, because you'd have 40 or 50 kids training on the pitch at the same time for a session for an hour, say on a Sunday or Saturday afternoon or whatever. And the next hour, there'll be another 40 or 50 kids being brought in by their parents. So you've got 80, 100 cars trying to find spaces, some lot trying to get out, some trying to get in. And we saw a picture of Monks Lane earlier. I'd imagine that being flooded with a traffic jam. And then the potential risks. I mean, I know we could, I'm not trying to exaggerate it, that it is like that at other places, like St. Bart's. I think some people can talk, they have training, and it's a one-way system there, so which helps the flow. But this is, the car park is right at the entrance to Monks Lane. So people getting out and people coming in from Monks Lane is a real problem.
Thank you. Councillor Barnett, can I just ask you, please, when speaking, I don't know if you turned your microphone on, did you?
Is it working?
We might need,
Is it
I think it
working
is,
now?
yes. Just bear with me one moment.
The red light again, press again.
Is it working now? Okay, it is, okay.
Thank you, Councillor Barnett. Councillor Vickers, please.
Thank you, Chairman. You referred towards the end of your speech, Councillor Miller, to some pre-application correspondence between Sport England and the council, I think. Are you able to elaborate more on that? Because it seems to be covering the key point about the order in which various planning applications should be submitted, which we haven't seen in the presentation or on the planning portal.
Yes, I mentioned that.
Simon,
Chairman, may I interject here? This is in relationship to discussions that may or may not have taken place outside of the application, and that in this format are being stated by conjecture rather than confirmed by evidence.
I agree.
Could I respond to that? Because there's no conjecture, it's black and white. That Sport England are open with their correspondence. It's an open, transparent public body.
Thank you very much. I'm going to move on there, Councillor Vickers, now to Councillor Cole.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor, you said something about the green areas to the north of the site. I think you expected them to be damaged as a result of the works. Am I correct?
I'm concerned, yes, yeah.
Okay, so you'd be perfectly happy then if we conditioned that they be fenced off properly?
Yes, although
I'm sure we'll be able to do that.
Thank you, Councillor Cole. Members, any further questions of Mr. Miller? Mr. Miller, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
I now move to the objectors, and I have half a dozen, 5 here on my list. Anyone? Just 2 of you. And would you be good enough to take the stand and introduce yourselves, please?
Good evening.
If you make sure, sir, your red light's on. That one?
Good evening. My name's Peter Lambert. I'm a local resident of Heather Gardens. I'm speaking on behalf of the local residents. I'm here with a fellow resident, Tim, and having discussed the issues with a number of my neighbours, we've come to a common statement and a common point of view.
Thank you very much. Now, so Mr. Lambert, you'll be speaking first.
So I'll be speaking first. I'll be followed by Mr. McDougall.
Mr. McDougall, thank you very much. And between the 2 of you, gentlemen, you will have a total of 5 minutes. You understand?
Understood.
And as before, I'll give you fair warning with a minute left to run and then 10 seconds to wrap up, if that's okay.
Thank you.
The time starts when you do.
Despite asking for a clear answer, we, the local residents, remain uncertain as to the purpose of this development and whether it is a replacement for Faraday Road or not. If it is supposed to be, then it is too small, too cramped, and not fit for purpose. If it is not a replacement, there is no need for a clubhouse. Either way, the plans appear to be fundamentally flawed. However, despite this lack of a clear and transparent strategy, the applicant appears determined to pursue the current plan, so we make the following points. 1, we are grateful to the rugby club and to the football club for agreeing that their first team matches will be played on alternate weekends, and request a condition is applied to any granting of the permission to this effect. 2, at present, the rugby club has agreed to the provision of an additional 30 car parking spaces. In order for the alternate weekend approach to be effective, we request that the additional spaces up to the full capacity of the rugby car park are made available on those weekends when the football club are playing at home, and this is made a condition. We also request that additional spaces are made available in the main car park for football squads, as and when required on weekday evenings when both football and rugby coaching sessions are taking place. 4, we are grateful that provision for overflow parking with 150 spaces is to be made available at Newbury College with a shuttle bus service. We request that this is a condition for all weekends when either first team is playing. 5, we note another condition has been recommended requiring the submission of a parking survey of surrounding streets at each future promotion of the football club. We request that any subsequent waiting restrictions should only apply on match days and that this also applies to any promotion of the rugby club. 6, the floodlights will be closer to the roads than the current floodlights and have the potential to be a nuisance to local residents and a distraction and safety issue to drivers on Monks Lane. We request that conditions apply to ensure that the lighting from the floodlights is protected from shining into and or over and beyond Monks Lane. We would be grateful if this could also be applied to the current floodlights.
Okay, hi everybody. Lee McDougall representing Newbury Community Football Group. So what's really clear tonight is there's lots of confusion about whether this is a replacement ground or not, or whether it's step 4 or step 6, which after a year of planning does seem quite bizarre. I think from what the planning officer said earlier, it is not a replacement for Faraday Road, but the confusion is being really led by the council. So if we look at the meeting tomorrow at the exec, the officer's report for Monks Lane states that the Newbury Sports Hub provides an enhanced replacement for Faraday Road Stadium. If the Newbury Sports Hub project is not brought forward, an alternative replacement site will need to be found for the London Road regeneration. So with the confusion of this application, we really recommend that it should be deferred or delayed while these clarifications are sought. It was positioned as a step 4 ground. At the site meeting, it was positioned as a step 6. We don't believe there's any way this could be a step 4 ground because you need to accommodate crowds of 1,300 people. And from what we've seen from the plans, there is no safe way of accommodating 1,300 people in that ground. It's very small. The pitch is so small that the RFU will not even allow rugby matches to be played on this pitch. And of course, the rugby club have priority access over football teams. And from what we've just heard, the pitch would stand empty every other Saturday because of the planning conditions. So I guess the request from us really is to delay and get clarity and look at other options. We seem to be running headfirst into plans that we can't stop. Why the council are now so worried about providing these provisions when after 3.5 years they were quite happy to have none. And we just really hope that this is not a kind of a cynical way of retrospectively trying to use this application as a justification for development at London Road over Faraday Road, because that would certainly warrant a judicial review. So I guess our ask is that we just take a step back. We don't need to be speeding headfirst into what would be a very expensive and warranted over-engineered solution for what appears to be a step 6 ground, but we're not quite sure. And we ask that you just take a step back, look at what alternative arrangements are possible, work with the football bodies, the community groups and other people to try and find a solution that can work for everybody. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. McDougall. Members' questions. I've got first Councillor Abbs.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Thank you, Mr. McDougall. You mentioned 30 parking spaces, and obviously the officers told us earlier 280 parking spaces. But has anybody actually, could you clarify why you're saying 30 and why the officer is saying 280?
Thank you, Councillor. I had a discussion with David Jones, President of the Newbury Rugby Football Club, and he confirmed the current agreement is for 30 spaces to be made available.
Just 30?
Just 30.
Okay, thank you.
I've got Councillor Culver next, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you for coming along to speak tonight. Regarding the floodlights, are there any floodlights there at the moment? You expressed concern about what they'd be like in the future, but are there any at the moment?
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, there are floodlights at the moment on the rugby pitches and they do shine into our bedrooms.
Okay.
We would be grateful if that could be changed.
Right, okay. And Mr. McDougall, I don't know the question I put to Councillor Miller before about how many spectators you would expect for step 4, step 5, step 6 would be useful, because it is very confusing from the site visit and from what I've read here and from what Mr. Goddard has said this evening. I'm still really confused about, is this proposal before us this evening a 6, a 5 or a 4? And what is the aspiration for how far it might go in the future?
Yeah, Paul, can I answer that question?
Yeah, I was on the list to
I'm
speak.
sorry.
I was on the list to speak, so this is perfectly legitimate. So we're just in.
We only had, I'm sorry, we only had two people
come on,
address.
guys, come on.
Chairman, it's printed
This is
on the
crazy
list. Paul
stuff.
Morgan.
Yeah, come on. I can answer the question. If somebody asks a question, I can answer that question. Yeah. Either you want me to answer or
So
not.
if you just bear with us 1 moment, please.
He wants to speak and answer a question. He's on the list but didn't speak.
It's just carried.
Yes. Yeah, thank you for that. Thank you for that. Yeah, it's a very good question. But basically, a step 4 facility, it goes through the steps. So step 2 is higher than step 3 and step 1 is higher than step 2. So for example, on step 4, it's quite clear that you have to have a capacity for 1,300 spectators. And you have to have a stand covering of about 300-400. Now, the existing Faraday Road ground was the last grading was step 5, but it had the capacity to go up to 2,500 people in the ground and covered stand of 500 people covered. So the higher you get and the steps.
Please, if we can just bring this back to this application rather than talk about the Faraday Road application, that's not on the agenda for this evening.
Okay,
So
I'm just making a comparison.
I understand fully, but if you can keep things to this application.
So in answer to
please,
the question, step 4 is 1,300 spectators. It's got to account for that. If the ground can't cope with that, it has to go back to step.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
I've got Councillor Culvey. Are you satisfied with that? Thank you very much. Councillor Vickers.
Thanks, Chairman. You introduced yourself, both of you gentlemen, as Newbury Community Football Club, but we don't have. I don't think members are clear. I'm certainly not entirely clear what your relationship is with the Newbury Football Club, which supports this application, and yet you are clearly very much opposed to it. So could you clarify the relationship and does Newbury Football
Yeah,
Club
again, Councillor Vickers, this is not relevant to the.
Chairman, it is, I mean, Newbury Football Club are quoted.
We're asking
several
questions
times
of
in the report.
clarification, Councillor Vickers, and that's not part of the gentleman's presentation.
It was. He introduced himself as Newbury Community Football Club. Sorry, Newbury Community Football Group. I want to know, does the football club belong to that grouping? And if so, why are they differing in their views to the group and what we've heard? That surely is a reasonable question. You, Chairman?
Chairman, it's on this Smith. Chairman, if I may, it would seem to me to go somewhat beyond consideration of the planning application, seeking clarity to differentiate between different groups of representations within consideration here tonight.
I'm inclined to agree, Mr. Till. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I was trying to lead on to demonstrate in the debate that this is not going to be economically sustainable unless the whole football community.
Yes, exactly. I'm sorry. This is questions of clarification. The debate will come later, and unless members have any further questions, gentlemen, thank you very much indeed.
Members won't have had clarification to that question, which I think is key to the argument, because there's nobody else that can clarify it, I don't believe.
I've taken legal advice, Councillor Vickers, and we'll leave it there. Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, moving on, we now have the agent. Mrs. Yule, can I ask you please to invite Mr. James Smith into the meeting? Thank you very much. Mr. Smith, can you hear me?
Good evening, Chairman and all. Can you hear me?
We can indeed. We can certainly hear you. I'm sure you've been following the proceedings. You know how this goes. You have 5 minutes to address the committee. I'll give you a fair warning at 4 and 10 seconds to wrap up at the end of your piece. And when you're ready, the time will start.
Thank you. My name is James Smith. I'm project architect at Saunders Boston, agent for Alliance Leisure and West Berkshire Council. There is a strategic need to correct the shortfall of artificial grass pitches within the council's district that was identified in the playing pitch strategy. Newbury Rugby Club presented itself as a very practical solution to help correct this shortfall, providing a real opportunity to create a new fit-for-purpose sports ground that can benefit both the local and wider community. The proposal is for a new artificial grass pitch and spectator seating, which is supported by a new social space, toilets, medical room, kitchen, servery, and 4 changing rooms. 4 changing rooms support the business case by allowing a high turnover rate, provides financial sustainability of the pitch, and for safeguarding purposes. To be clear, the future-proofed facility has been designed to meet FA Step 4 ground grading requirements and World Rugby 22. However, the current level play that will be played and the clubs that will play there are at FA Step 6 requirements. The proposal has 83 parking spaces, 53 at the pavilion site itself and 30 at the Newbury Rugby Club. Agreements and proposed conditions are in place to prevent overlapping rugby and football matches, as well as the requirement for parking arrangements to be reconsidered in the event of any promotion. As has been stated, 150 parking bays are to be provided at Newbury College on game days. A BREEAM pre-assessment has been conducted and shows we are achieving a standard of very good standard and generally an excellent in the energy performance category. Some examples of sustainable measures being taken: all electric air source heat pumps, low flow rate showers, permeable paving to the car park surrounding artificial grass pitch, SUDS attenuation in the form of a tank below the car park and tanking system to the artificial grass pitch. And finally, 4 electric vehicle charging spaces. There is a biodiversity net gain due to the inclusion of 300 metres of double planted hedgerows. Planting over 100 trees are part of the Queen's Canopy and a bee bank, to name a few items. Proposed preventative measures reduce microplastics from leaving the site to 15 kilograms per year, and consultation is ongoing to mitigate offset this final small amount. The acoustic and lighting reports detail how measures have been put in place to reduce the impact below the background conditions and planning and legal requirements. The building is a simple form, single story, pitched roof with a car park in front of it. The design is aimed at reducing the impact of the building on the local surroundings and providing a clear route through the site. External materials, brick and timber effect board, provide a robust design while breaking up the long facade. To answer some of the points raised, there is 30 parking spaces committed by the rugby club by the ability for more if required. Your operator will be tendered to provide a best value solution, and there will be
1 minute left, Mr. Smith.
Professional booking system. Step 4 is proposed and supported by Sport England, who have consulted with both rugby and football and have reviewed the business plan. Sport England historic comments have been addressed and now do not have any objections. The impact of trees will be mitigated by fences along the northern boundary of the site and route protection zones. A new path will be integrated into the car park as raised by Paul, Mr. Goddard. I'd like to reiterate that both noise and light surveys have been completed for the site. Thank you very much.
That is well timed, sir. Thank you very much. Members' questions. I've got Councillor Rolls first, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, this may actually be more appropriate to question officers, but I just wanted a clarification on the number of parking spaces you mentioned. I believe you said 53, and yet I have 52 parking spaces on my update sheet. And then you mentioned 30 from the rugby club, and we have 280. Just wondered, is that 30 sort of specifically ring fenced and the rest is sort of generally available? and also just to confirm, did you say 53 or did you mean 52?
The 30 is specifically ring fenced and is associated with this pavilion. It is, you are correct, it should be 52. That was an error on my part. It should be 52. You are correct.
Thank you.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Abbs next.
Thank you. Very happy that Councillor Rolls asked that, because I would have asked it. Yeah, my maths didn't work quite the same as his did. You said when you were presenting to us that changing rooms will generate money or something to that effect. I'm struggling to understand how a changing room generates money and makes the solution viable. Could you expand on that for me, please?
So the 4 changing rooms is so that 2 changing rooms can be used to allow 2 teams to go onto the pitch, and they'll be blocked off. 2 then new teams can come in before the next session starts, get changed ahead of the downtime on ahead of the changeover, so that effectively there is no downtime for the pitch.
So yeah, that's efficiency and use of the pitch, which I totally accept. But you linked it to fiscal, and I'm struggling to see how it makes it fiscally more viable. And maybe the cafe might, but there is no cafe, is there? Of course, no.
Well, that's to prevent any downtime, which allows for greater usage, which would turn into revenue if it's booked a booked system.
I think, well, are we just looking at an efficient turnover of time?
Yeah, I get the efficiency bit of getting people on and off the pitch. It was the link to generating money I wasn't so clear on, Chairman. I do have a secondary, but you mentioned, and you were very careful there, you're doing only very good. Sorry, look at the right place on the screen. You're only doing very good from a BREEAM's perspective, when CS15 definitely given our officers advice most recently that we should be at excellent, and only on the energy side are you becoming excellent. Did I hear you correctly? Did I mishear you? So in other words, we're not quite reaching the standard we wanted to.
No, you heard me correctly.
All right.
Reassessment has been conducted and is achieving very good at present.
Well, sorry, this was presented to us, we can clarify with officers, as this will be an BREEAM excellent build, not a BREEAM very good build.
Best directed at officers. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And may I just do one final? It's a very quick one. Double planting proposed. Whenever I look and walk around the site, there is already planting on the locations that you're indicating you're going to plant. So seriously, how much additional biodiversity are you really going to get by topping up what's already there?
So that's double planting. So that's another hedgerow along it, which creates additional habitats. It's calculated using a biodiversity metric, which
okay, just pause you there then. What is the out? Is it 1.1 then, the outcome, or greater?
Of the metric?
Yes.
Without the calculation in front of me, I can't speak to that.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Smith. Mr. Till, would that again better be directed to officers?
Sorry, could you repeat the question, Councillor Ash?
Yes, obviously the guidance is basic, and the bills going through Parliament are demanding 1.1 as the target as a council. We've been climate emergencies, we're heading for 1.1 is, I understood where everybody's going. So I'm just trying for clarification. Is this design just giving a biodiversity net gain or is it going for the 1.1, which is the bill that's running through Parliament at the moment?
I think if
I think that is best addressed.
I think yes, we will bring that back. Yeah, it's not for this part of the presentation. I'll go now to Councillor Culver, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Smith. Could you elaborate a little bit on the water runoff? Because we saw a picture earlier. It looked like quite a steep bank between the proposed pitch and the existing rugby pitch. And bearing in mind this is an AGP, do you have any concerns that there might be excess runoff, and how would you mitigate that?
So that has been considered. There's a tanking system below the AGP, which I believe allows for attenuation of off the top of my head, I think it's about 700 meters cubed, which would then flow off site and would prevent that water from running onto the rugby pitch.
Councillor Cole, but Councillor Cole.
Thank you, Chairman. A couple of questions. Curiosity on my part. Mention of microplastics. I thought this pitch was to be made of rubber. How do we get microplastics out of rubber?
So SBR rubber crumb, which is a recycled product, does unfortunately produce plastics that end up in.
So it's a real issue.
Yes.
Okay. Second question. You mentioned lighting, and we're talking about floodlights, and there's been a comment that the existing floodlighting has some effect on the residents. Now, it happens that Councillor Rolls and I were involved in a discussion over a site elsewhere where there is existing floodlighting, which does cause some difficulty to residents. But what we were told at the time was that new floodlighting could be directional.
That is correct. And that there will be directional cowls fitted. These are much more specific than older fittings. We'll obviously have LED lighting rather than traditional lighting systems. And this leads to a much lower level, somewhere close to 2 lux outside the ground from escaping.
So it is not the same thing as current old style lighting. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Collar, but Councillor Rolls back.
Thank you, Chairman. Just following on from the lighting point, Mr. Smith, can you just clarify, because it's not entirely clear, whether we're replacing the existing lighting, or are we adding to, or are there going to be less lights? And I'm sort of thinking along where Monk's Lane is, specifically where it may impact on the residents.
So we will obviously be producing. There will be new lighting to the pitch, which will be that directional lighting that we've discussed. We're not touching any of the existing sort of lighting along Monk's Lane itself, but in comparison, the existing lighting along Monk's Lane will produce, I think, around 15 lux escaping from there, whereas our new lights will be more around 2 lux.
Sorry, can I just clarify this? So it's in addition to what's there, we will be adding more lights that are directional?
For the pitch, yes.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rolls. Members, any further questions? Mr. Smith, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Chair.
And Mrs. Yule, if you kindly escort Mr. Smith back to the waiting room. Okay, now at the Chairman's discretion, I'm going to invite the portfolio holder and as a member with an interest in this application. Councillor Wollaston has sought to address the committee, and I will invite Councillor Wollaston to address the meeting.
Apologies, Chairman, he's not on the list. Should we not be following the list of people who's asked in advance to
Thank you,
speak?
Councillor Culver. I will pass over to my legal counsel, who will explain this presentation. Mrs. Marr.
Councillor Wollaston made a submission and requested to speak, as you've permitted to do so under Rule 9, Part 13. It's at the Chair's discretion to allow him to speak, and at what point during the course would be the most sensible. And we have decided that this is the most appropriate point for him to.
That's fair enough. In effect, he's the applicant. But if you're going to give 10 minutes to the applicant, i.e. 5 minutes to the agent and 5 minutes to the applicant himself, surely other speakers should have had 5 minutes as well. Under what part of the Constitution are we allowed to do
Again,
this?
Councillor Vickers, I will defer to Mrs. Moore.
It's part 13, number 9. They're entitled to speak if they request, and it's at the chair's discretion.
What about this? The main part of my objection was that you're not giving equal time to applicant and objectors.
As a point of
Councillor Vickers, you're the vice chairman. You should know the Constitution.
As a point of thank you, Councillor Hooker. As a point of clarification, Mr. Sheikh will direct me. I think Councillor Wollaston is entitled to speak for.
Absolutely, the Constitution actually doesn't
specify amount of, it doesn't specify an amount of time to which he's restricted. So he will have a maximum of 5 minutes. I can assure you it won't be any more than that. And members will have the chance to ask questions of clarification of Councillor Wollaston after he's made his presentation. Councillor Wollaston, I can see you on screen. Can you hear me okay?
I said again, Chairman. Thank you for kindly agreeing that I may speak tonight as a member, but also as policyholder on the executive, for amongst other things, leisure, which includes sport.
Councillor Wollaston, I will stop you there. I'll just make sure our clock is running.
I will be under 5 minutes, Chairman, don't worry.
You may start. Thank you very much.
For that reason, I'm not taking part in this decision, as I'm clearly compromised. I took over this portfolio in May 2021, shortly after the playing pitch strategy was approved. This is a 10-year programme which recognised a shortage of 8 3G artificial pitches and a number of grass pitches across the district for all sports, but particularly football. At the same time, it was recognised that the council's aspiration for economic and housing regeneration on the overall London Road industrial estate necessitated a replacement of the old sports pitch at Faraday Road. A report had already been commissioned to identify potential council-owned sites within the 20-minute drive time of Faraday Road, but I quickly dismissed all of them as unworkable. As a result, I asked officers to approach major landowners, and in particular Newbury Rugby Football Club, to see if there was any opportunity, and to my delight, we got a welcome reception from the rugby club. We rapidly agreed to heads of terms and appointed the design team to work up a proposal ahead of approaching Sport England, the Football Association, the RFU, etc. So there's the background to the application you see before you tonight. A state-of-the-art sports hub featuring a world-class 3G artificial pitch with technologically advanced floodlighting, a high-quality covered stand, and a 4,000 square foot clubhouse with 4 changing rooms to facilitate mixed-sex teams and safeguarding for children. A medical room, officials' changing rooms, a function room, boardroom, kitchen, and office. The building is BREEAM excellent for energy provision, incorporating air-sourced heat pumps. We hope to get it to BREEAM excellent by the time it is completed. A pitch that can be used for 80 hours a week, not the measly 6 at Faraday Road. A scheme fully supported by Newbury Football Club, whose new home it will be. Fully supported by the Hellenic League, where they currently play, and with no objections from Sport England or the major sporting organisations.
Point of order.
Also a pitch that, assuming no complication.
Councillor Wilson, I have a point of order, please. Mr. Karim, if you stop the clock. Councillor.
Thank you very much. We were specifically told that it wasn't linked to Faraday Road, and yet the portfolio holder has immediately linked it to Faraday Road. We weren't supposed to be considering that this evening. Can we at least have avoidance of this linkage to Faraday Road? Otherwise, we're just going to be confused when it comes to the debate on what we're actually debating.
I take your point.
That's a clarification in respect of the replacement pitch on Faraday Road. We're going to sign in when it's time.
Yes.
If they've got questions, that's
Yes.
the right person to ask.
Yes. So as far as, just for clarification, Mrs. Marlin, as far as Councillor Wilson's presentation is concerned.
He may continue. You can ask points of clarification to him on his presentation. And in terms of questions such as the one that you've just raised, I think you would put that to Simon at the appropriate time later.
Thank you, Mrs. Marr. Mr. Karimi, Mr. Wilson, when you're ready.
Also a pitch that, assuming no complications, can be played on by our local teams for the 2022 and 2023 season. There will always be objections, so can I allay some? It's too far from the town centre. I was hoping that Paul Dake, former headmaster at Kennet School and a fully qualified football referee, could speak in favour tonight, but sadly he missed out on a timing technicality. Paul confirmed my impression that the vast majority of clubs in the lower leagues have grounds on the edge of the town, mainly because the town centre sites are too valuable. Local examples include Basingstoke, Thatcham, Hungerford, and of course, most importantly, Reading. Parking is a problem. We have 52 spaces. We have agreement with the rugby club that home fixtures will not be played on the same day and for football fixtures. And we can use up to 280 of those spaces. We've also agreed the use of 150 spaces with Newbury College on match days. And we have detailed plans on a traffic plan scheme as part of the conditions, which were fully explained by Mr. Goddard. Football won't get its fair share of playing time. Approaching 90% of playing time is dedicated to football. The two exceptions are Sunday mornings, allocated for mini rugby, but free for Newbury ladies matches in the afternoons, and two-hour training slots on weekday evenings for 40 weeks only of the year. We have not finished there. As part of the overall deal, we will be providing 2 bookable grass pitches for mini football, specifically on a Sunday morning. So to summarise, we are providing an outstanding sporting facility at an affordable cost for the benefit of Newbury and West Berkshire. A facility that most clubs will give their eye teeth for, and a facility that we'll be able to be proud of. I can confirm that this is a step 4 facility. 3 weeks ago, this committee gave unanimous consent to 2 applications on the old Faraday Road site, submitted by Newbury Community Football Group, even though it was quite clear they were unimplementable. This committee gave those consents on the basis that there were no objections. Thank you. And I trust that members will follow the same approach tonight. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Woolston. Members, any questions of clarification of the portfolio holder? Councillor Abbs, straight in.
Thank you. Good evening, Councillor. I just want to be sure that I heard you correctly, because it's going to come up now later. This is definitely a step 4.
This is definitely a step 4 facility. It's currently shown as step 6, but that is because of, if I can finish, that is because the most senior club in Newbury is Newbury Football Club, who currently play at step 7. So we only need to demonstrate step 6, but it is capable of, it will be a step 4 facility.
Okay. So do you mind sharing with, or do you want officers to share with the other members the details around what a step 4 ground has to deliver? Things like spectators on at least 3 sides of the pitch, which is almost, I really can't see how that does, just for starters. Step 4, to retain its position, having to have 1,300 seats for at least 1,300 spectators. None of that is anywhere close to the application in front of us. So if you are sticking to this is a step 4 facility, then I will review it and take this planning application as a step 4 facility. So I just want to be clear from you that that's what you want me to do.
I actually made exactly the same question to officers, and I'm completely assured that there are scope for spectators to view from 3 sides. We can meet the numbers required, and it is definitely a step 4 facility.
Thank you very much, Councillor.
Councillor Abbs. Councillor Vickers.
Thank you, Chairman. Welcome to the meeting, Councillor Wollaston. We missed you.
Thank you very much.
Mike, I have 3 questions, if I may, Chairman. The first one is, you used the word unimplementable, referring to the other application, which we're not supposed to mention. Is that not because the current governing body of that applicant simply doesn't want it to be implemented? Is there any other reason, planning reason, why it is unimplementable? And I want to hear a planning reason. Chairman, this is a planning committee, and if it's not a planning reason, we shouldn't be hearing statements like that.
Is it relevant to this planning application, Councillor Vickers?
Well, it is if we are considering the 2 scenarios, as I was told we were, which is either this is a standalone application before us tonight, or one that is potentially and hopefully, in the eyes of some, a replacement. I mean, you've got to look at both of those options.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll let Mr. Till come in at that point.
Chairman, you are considering tonight whether the application in front of you has the potential to meet the requirements as a step 6 facility. You are also being asked to consider whether the conditions that officers have recommended are suitable for it to meet the requirements for a step 4 facility. In respect of Faraday Road, which I will mention, the The planning application or the planning permissions at Faraday Road are a separate planning permission, and discussion as to whether that site can or will be developed is not for this meeting, Chairman.
Well, absolutely fair enough, Chairman, but we heard from Councillor Wilson plenty of references to that other site. So surely we're allowed to pursue questions along those lines. Either that, or he should be interrupted and told on a point of order that he should not be talking about it.
We've heard from our senior planning officer, and that is not part of this planning application.
Well, then he shouldn't talk about it, Chairman. Could you please use your powers to stop irrelevant subjects being brought up in that case?
Thank you, Councillor Vickers. Councillor Culver.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm a bit concerned about how tetchy this meeting's getting. I've always enjoyed these meetings and found them very straightforward and objective. And I almost feel scared to ask a question, to be honest. So I just want to put that on the record. Councillor, I don't know why you're laughing, Councillor Wollaston. I have a question for you.
I welcome the question, Councillor.
Thank you, Councillor Wollaston. You mentioned about the ability to have seating on three sides at the end of your comments, but we have, I asked a question of the previous speaker about the lower ground and the concern about whether there'd be any flooding from there, and he answered me and he said there'd be a tank. But on the other side, there's an existing rugby pitch. So where about, if you were to have if you were to have seating on three sides, how would you accommodate that if you have the potential for water runoff and the the existing rugby pitch? Thank you.
I'm always polite to you, Councillor Culver, as you know. The reason that I said that is because you don't actually need to have seating on all three sides. You need to have spectators being able to watch on all three sides. So we will have the stand on one side and spectators standing on the other two. In fact, in the other three.
That answers your question, Councillor Culver. Thank you, Councillor.
Can I come back with other questions?
Please. Yes, I'll take you, Councillor Vickers.
I promise this is nothing to do with the other side. We heard, Councillor Wilson, you talk about the planning and the numbers of cars briefly, I must admit, but we've also heard from Mr. Goddard, who admitted that spectators are unlikely to walk from the college, let alone the town centre. And you listed a number of towns which are far smaller than Newbury, where the edge of town is much closer to the centre, and a much bigger town, Reading, where they have much bigger car parking on site and much better public transport. So can you explain how you disagree with Mr. Goddard's belief that, people won't walk even from the college, which is why we've got these conditions?
I can say I've actually been to Reading to watch two or three football matches there, and I have not been able to park on the Medeisi Stadium. I have parked at least, I think, a mile away, and I've walked to the stadium, and I don't have a problem with that. In fact, I think it's part of the fun of the day. So I'm afraid I just don't accept this as a problem.
Councillor Vickers, does that?
Well, I mean, I've also walked more than a mile to watch Liverpool, and even Reading, even though it's not in the Premier League, is a lot higher than even Newbury Football Club, I'm sure, aspires to. But for a club of a town and a club of the size that we're talking about today, we've heard from a highways officer, and I just wanted to know why Councillor Wollaston disagrees with our professional advisor. But no, I don't need another.
Thank you, Councillor Vickers. Councillor Abbs.
Yes, thank you very much, Chairman. It's really just something I hope Councillor Wollaston will be able to clarify for me. As you go from step 6 to 5 to 4 in the FA's guidelines, it's quite detailed about spectators, where they have, and they have a clear preference for at least 2 seated sides of any pitch as you go from this level 6 to a level 4. It's in the documentation. I read it all this afternoon. Very interesting reading. So I'm just... but you've just stated, Councillor Wollaston, that in fact you expect people to stand on 2 sides and only one side is ever to be seated. And that stand, of course, is nowhere big enough for a step 4 either, because it's only 268. So I'm getting really stuck.
Of clarification.
Well, how is he squaring the round hole?
Councillor Wilson.
I'm equally as sad as you, Councillor Abbs, and I've also read the documentation.
Yeah.
And it's quite clear that although it's a preference, it's not a requirement that you have to have stands on two sides. It is a preference only. And what we are producing or proposing here meets absolutely, and I've been through it with a fine tooth comb with both with officers and myself personally, it meets what's required for step 4.
Councillor Wilson, thank you very much. Members, any further questions of the portfolio? Councillor Wilson, thank you very much indeed.
Pleasure.
And I shall ask Mrs. Yule to take you back to the waiting room. We move now on to the ward members, and I believe Councillor Marsh, good evening, Councillor Marsh, and Councillor Abbs are going to share this slot. Do we have any ideas?
Well, Chairman, if you remember, my feedback is both positive and negative, and it's quite often the Chairman allows the positives to be done as a separate slot to the negative. I'm happy to combine it with Councillor Marsh, but it's your discretion, of course.
Well, then I will do that. I'll invite Councillor Marsh in to speak, and you, Councillor Marsh, will have 5 minutes. You'll have 5 minutes. Yes, I'm
in that case, Councillor Marsh, I'd only need a minute in that case. So. Because as long as I'm going to be allowed
I'll come to you, Councillor Abbs, after Councillor Marsh's.
All of mine isn't positive, you see what I mean?
No.
So are we saying I've got 5 or I've got 4 and Adrian's got 1?
You have 5 minutes, Councillor Marsh. And as soon as you're ready, we'll start.
Before my mercifully brief comments, Chair, I just wonder if I could ask two pieces of clarification from the officers, because I'm a bit confused about something and it may help the members to genuinely, because there were omissions from what the 2 of the earlier reports that I think would be helpful if we could ask them.
Councillor Marsh, I'm sorry, your presentation.
Okay,
please.
All right. Well, just for the record, then, the 2 points were when Mr. Masiwa spoke about the neighbouring surgery, pharmacy, care home and David Lloyd Leisure Centre. He made no reference to the Priory Hospital, which has 34 high dependency rehabilitation patients there. And I was just wondering whether the council was aware of that facility and whether any consideration had been given to it, because those people and the people in the care home and the people who use the surgery are the closest to the pitch. And are therefore most likely to be affected by noise pollution and light pollution. The other point that I wanted to ask, which is unrelated to that, was of Mr. Goddard, and perhaps they can answer these later, was the following. In the condition 10, it lists all the roads that are believed to be affected, including places like Highlands, which is nowhere near the ground. It doesn't mention Monks Lane, which I just assumed was a mistake, because it seems very odd to me when there are so many people who are so close to the pitch in Monks Lane that there wouldn't be any record kept of the effect on parking there. Anyway, to my speech, this is the first opportunity in nearly a year since these plans were unveiled that I, the other ward members, or indeed any West Berkshire councillors, apart from the 9 executive members, have had any opportunity to discuss these proposals. I do not understand that approach. I really don't. As a council, we will never take people with us if they are denied a stake in the process. Anyway, here we are. I won't repeat what other people have said about the potentially huge financial burden to council taxpayers, about the shortcomings of this site at higher levels as a potential ground for football to be played at a level that the people of Newbury might reasonably expect. I'd just like to talk about 1 or 2 of the local planning issues as they affect people near the ground in the ward. And I would also like to say, and I'm sorry to say this, I'm not necessarily blaming all the officers, I'm not, but I think some of the consultants you've employed have put in some very poor work. It's been a poor application in many regards, riddled with errors and omissions.
May I?
Marsh, if you just stop.
I could give examples.
Mr. Till.
Chairman, I do not think it's appropriate in a public meeting to be criticising officers in this manner. I would appreciate it if matters were kept respectful between members and officers.
I agree.
Okay.
Well, Councillor Marsh, if you would please keep.
I'm not criticising officers, but I think some of the consultants' work that has been done.
It did come across that way, Councillor Marsh. If you begin.
Apologies, Mr. Till. Noise pollution and light pollution. I think the noise report is wholly inadequate. It's based on a crowd of 30 people. Yet even a step 6 facility, which we now learn that this isn't, it's step 4, but even step 6 has to have covered accommodation for 100 people. Light pollution, well, I thought the report accompanying the application was very technical, very incomprehensible to the layperson. But what we have heard is there'll be floodlighting on the boundary of Monks Lane many nights of the week outside the summer, and we've already heard that it already affects neighbouring properties. And I am concerned, since nobody, sorry to bang on about this, but since nobody has seen fit to consult or even inform those very vulnerable neighbouring buildings and facilities right next door to the site, very near to the pitches. The pitch is 2 metres up because it's been filled in by the rugby club in the past. I really am concerned about those issues, and I don't think they've been answered. On traffic and transport, well, we can disagree about whether people are going to walk up a hill, up a steep hill from the town centre to the ground. I don't think they will. We know that people are lazy. We know that they're lazy when it comes to parking, which is why I fear, and residents fear, because it already happens on rugby match days, that people will park at the surgery, the pharmacy, and in nearby residential areas. If you live in Monks Lane, Heather Gardens, Rupert Road, Sutherlands, all the other roads that Mr. Goddard refers to, you are going to be very worried indeed that people will just do what they do, which is selfishly park in the nearest space, rather than sit around at the college waiting for the shuttle bus that may or may not come.
That's 1 minute, Councillor.
It's all very well, thank you, Chair. It's all very well saying the rugby club and football club won't play at the same time, but what about other events, of which there are a number? On the weekend of 6th and 7th of November, Newbury Rugby Club celebrated its 25th birthday at Monks Lane, and the website said, please come along next Saturday and Sunday to celebrate. There will be Newbury Blues v Beaconsfield, Newbury Women v Newbury Abbott Women, Newton Abbott Women, real ale, cider, mini festival, live music, food stalls. And by the way, this was the weekend of the first round of the FA Cup in football, which Newbury in a couple of seasons might aspire to be reaching. To be fair, it's a good deal for the rugby club. As a ward member, I want to see the successful rugby club and the security of the rugby club, but I don't think it should be at the expense of the wider community. And I know many members of the club have serious reservations about the development. There's also a 3G pitch next door at Park House School and talk of a Newbury College. So can we not take the attitude, if in doubt, stick it in Wash Common?
And thank you very much.
And I urge members to reject this application. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Indeed. I go to questions of clarification from members. I've got a hand from Councillor Vickers.
Sorry, it's an old hand.
Members, any questions of clarification?
Just one on the
Councillor
public,
Doherty?
one on the public consultation. Was the ward member not aware of the public consultation that was held for 6 weeks at the start of the year? And was the ward member not aware of the consultation that goes with all planning applications?
Well, there's consultation. If you think people in a care home are all that likely to be responding to that sort of consultation, I think you're wrong. Let's be realistic about it. If you think people in the Priory are going to be responding to that consultation. Also, the consultation was many months ago. Councillor Doherty, the consultation was in January or at the beginning of the year when this was first mooted. The plan has changed today. The plan has changed tonight at this meeting.
You've clarified that you knew that there was public consultation.
Oh, in the answer to your question, yes, I was aware. And in fact, I attended the webinar. Very interesting too.
Councillor Marsh. I'm looking around that room for any further hands, and I don't have any. Councillor Marsh, thank you very much. I'm going to turn now to Councillor Abbs. No, if you'd stay where you are, please.
Thank you, Chair. I certainly
hold the line 1 second.
I won't need 5 minutes.
Are we good?
It's fine.
When you're ready.
Okay. Just to give other members a background, obviously I'm a ward member and I'm speaking here specifically with a ward member's hat on. And given the significance of this application, I took it upon myself to walk Monks Lane, Rupert Road, Roberts Cloak, Chandos Road, Heather Gardens, Sutherlands, obviously saying hi to the residents as I went along anyway, as part of my ward duties, but also specifically to ask them quite recently what they thought was, and if they had any thoughts about this. So first, the positive. If you are talking about people that live on the A339 end of Monks Lane, they're generally barely aware most of the time of things going down at the rugby club. And the further you go along Monks Lane and into Essex Road, the same is true. However, the closer you get to the entrances of the rugby club, the more the feedback changed. So, and pretty much universally, everybody, give or take one or two, everybody said, yes, we need more pitches. So I don't think anybody's arguing against a more pitch strategy. I wouldn't argue against the more pitch strategy. But as soon as you get closer, you get to the experience, and the experience is what happens in the real world when you start having large matches of any kind. At the moment, it's just rugby that's happened, and we heard the numbers of that earlier, so that's fine. So the positive is they want it or want something. The negative is they've got real concerns. So what are the concerns they wanted me to express on their behalf? First of all, it obviously is to do with parking, because they wouldn't have experienced parking issues if there was plenty of on-site parking already. So it's not a theoretical issue, it's a real issue that occurs on largish match days. And that problem, as far as I understand from quite a lot of residents, has never quite disappeared. So even though it's not what it once was, it's certainly not disappeared completely. The second issue that was raised, to my surprise, was the quality of the build. So I talked to my residents about the climate emergency that we've declared and how we're doing and so on a fair bit. And some of them, because it was quite recent, had started to look at this application and were noting that there was no solar panels on the roof. And tonight we heard about air source. But for them, the whole, are we delivering something that really is the right kind of emblem that we want to show us what we can do in West Berkshire? The conclusion seemed to be that we weren't. They wanted us to try harder. Okay. And then third was, for those that have kind of a more green hat on, they brought up the biodiversity issue. Now, once you get past those three issues, they were kind of the feedback was very bitty. And that's really what I wanted to share with you all this evening as a ward member walking around, and give you some idea of my survey compared with the one that was done here. I probably got at least 40% of the doors answered, and I'd spoken to at least one resident in those homes. So I had a very high hit rate, and therefore I can be very sure of the feedback I'm giving you in terms of both positive and negative. And that's really all I wanted to share as a ward member.
Thank you, Councillor Abs. Members, any questions? I've got Councillor Doherty.
Thank you, Councillor Abs. Just a point of clarification. I think that the Newbury Rugby Club recently celebrated 25 years of being on that site. And I believe that certainly the nearest homes were built after the Newbury Rugby Club. You talk about a problem that's never quite gone away. And I'm just wondering for clarification, obviously when those homes were built, the rugby club was already there. And you said there's been a long-term issue. Why haven't we addressed that long-term issue if it's been an ongoing issue? Because we've heard tonight we can put conditions in. So why at this stage are we talking about these conditions if you're saying there's been a
you would have to ask the traffic and highways
Well, I'm
people.
asking the ward member, because as a ward member, it's something that I work hard for my residents in the area to try to actually make sure we get in place if there's a requirement.
Absolutely, Councillor, and it's something I can carry forward at previous meetings. But I've recently completed the survey, so that's being presented to you this evening, and any further actions that my residents wish me to take, I will take, but that's not really part of a planning meeting.
And that's something we can bring up.
What point of clarification it was, Councillor Abs?
Sorry. Yes, thank you.
Thank you both. Members, any further questions? Councillor Abs, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Indeed, we now move on to questions of clarification of officers. Members, Councillor Abs, you're first in. Your question 2, please.
I've unfortunately got an awful lot, so I would suggest you take
we'll
a few.
take one and then we'll move on. And then we'll come
but
back
you,
to you
do understand that I've got about 15 questions.
Which officer would you like to address, please?
Well, let me just get my list up, because I spent quite a lot looking at this. Do apologise. Got the wrong piece of paper up at the moment. Bear with me. Here we go. No, it's not.
I can go to Councillor Barnett.
Go to someone else and I'll come back.
Councillor Barnett.
Through you, Chairman, question to Paul Goddard. The parking issue. We're talking about 52 parking spots plus 30. Have you considered the other issue in relationship to the existing number of vehicles which might be generated eventually through the surrounding buildings, and we've heard it mentioned tonight about the doctor's surgery, and of course at the moment doctor's surgery, very few doctors in, also very few patients in, and also although the car park is full because of people that are using it for other reasons, as well as the pharmacy. Also, restricted numbers allowed at the Priory, restricted numbers allowed at the care home at the present time. That's all going to generate extra amount of vehicles. Very narrow road. The access onto the Monks Lane is not ideal at all. It's difficult to access it unless the traffic lights are against the traffic.
And your question, yes.
The question basically is, have all these other points been considered in relationship to the car parking, Mr. Goddard?
Chairman, yes, they have, on the basis that the proposal for you, the busiest time it will be used will be off-peak. It would be weekday evenings and at weekends, when other uses are less busy, including the overall highway network. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Goddard. I'm going to go to Councillor Abbs. Have you found your,
Yes, thank you very much.
your
I
long list
appreciate
of
that.
questions? We'll take the first of those, please.
Okay, the first one is a very simple one, is when was the consultation? Can you confirm rather that the consultation was done before the planning app was on the portal?
Yes, question two.
I guess, I don't know which officer would put the consultation out there. Is it an officer or is it the executive that does that? I'm not entirely sure.
Thank you, Chairman. I think I can formulate an answer to Councillor Abbs's question, which is that this would have been a question that was better directed at the applicant earlier in the meeting, who actually has responsibility for undertaking the consultation. However, the feedback from the consultation is made available through the documents submitted within the planning application, Councillor Abbs.
So would you kind of agree with me, given the dates on those, the consultation must have been done before the planning application arrived on the portal? Is the date one precedes the other? Or would you could confirm that if a date precedes the other, then it must have been before? Either way.
Can I answer that? Yes, there's a statement of community involvement which was submitted by the applicant, and their dates are before the planning application was submitted.
Thank you very much, Massey.
Thank you, Mr. Masiwa. I'm going to move to Councillor Culver.
Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Till or Macy might be able to answer this. With regard to what Councillor Wollaston said about, are we expecting that there will be, if we have step 4, that there will be standing spectators on the other sides of the pitch? One of the existing rugby pitches abuts the pitch we're talking about tonight, and there's also a steep runoff on another side and a car park on the third side. So is our understanding that in order to meet step 4, we would expect people to stand in those areas?
Thank you, Councillor Culver. Yes, so with the different steps, we have received the consultation comments from Sport England. The Football Association guidelines requires that the minimum requirement for capacity of a facility is calculated by a competent person. I can confirm Sport England in their comments, which are on the file, indicate that the proposed development is designed to step 4. We have considered it at step 6 as explained because Newbury Football Club are playing at a lower league, and the next that they would be getting into would be step 6. And according to the ground guidance, step 6 has no minimum capacity. So what I would say is that Sports England, in our view, is a competent assessor of the capacity of the various ground grading systems. And if they are happy that it's designed to a step 4, then we would go with that.
So I assume from that Sport England, if we're going to have step 4, will expect us to have standing spectators on the other 3 sides. It just doesn't make any sense to me.
Mr. Masiwa, do you want to pick that up, please?
Yes, I mean, I wouldn't know, Mr. Chairman, about the standing spectators, but I suppose with what Councillor Wollaston has said, it is possible. But the current application has only got a spectator stand with a seating capacity of 268. With that, Sports England have declared that it is designed to step 4. So I assume that, yes, it accommodates standing spectators as well.
Thank you, Mr. Masiwa.
Thank you very much. Councillor Rolls.
Thank you, Chairman. I've got one question for Mr. Goddard and one for the planning officers. So to Mr. Goddard first. I note that there's 2 disabled spaces allocated for the site. I'm just sort of conscious that then we have a sort of overflow to other areas. Are there more designated disabled spaces in those other areas? That's my first question. And is that sufficient? It seems like 2 disabled spaces is not a great deal compared to the number actually allocated, but I'd be interested on the guidance on that.
Mr. Goddard.
Chairman, we normally seek 4%. Of course, if you've got 52, that works out at about 2 spaces. So it does comply with the relevant standards. Therefore, we've found 2 spaces to be acceptable on that basis.
To Councillor Rolls' point, the overflow parking, would that have a similar percentage provision?
Yes, and in the rugby club area, there is already quite a few disabled parking spaces there for use by such groups of people. Yeah.
Can I just have a supplementary to that? So if we are ring fencing 30 at the rugby club, would we seek to have some disabled places within that?
Chairman, I would hope so. I've heard this ring fencing being mentioned. I don't have details of what spaces are going to be ring fenced and how that's going to be managed. I imagine that would be a private arrangement between both clubs. But 30 has been allocated, but I think in reality, because matches will not be played concurrently, more than 30 spaces will be available.
Okay, thank you. And sorry, may I have a second question
Please
to
do.
planning? It's just on the condition regarding adult matches. I wondered why that condition doesn't include youth as well. Based on, so it says adult football and rugby home matches, why we haven't included youth matches within that.
Mr. Masiwa, do you want to pick that up?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Councillor Rolls. I think the assumption is that the main teams for the football clubs and the rugby club would attract the most spectators, the most attendance, so with that, we focused on those really in terms of that. That's where the increased demand on parking would be. In terms of the youth teams, there would be demand for parking, but mostly that would be dropping and pick up with parents as well. So it is a different kind of consideration. But in terms of the additional demand, we focused on the main first teams matches.
Thank you, Mr. Masiwa. Councillor Rolls, you're done there.
Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Doherty.
Thank you, Chairman. I've got 2 questions, if I may, to Mr. Goddard. Mr. Goddard, CS13, does that take into account changes of behaviour due to our declaration of a climate emergency? So have we taken into account things like active travel and people more inclined to try not to drive to the location in the first place?
Policy CS13 was obviously written some 10 years ago. So I think climate change was an issue at that time. but yes, we've always assessed planning applications to ensure that people could travel to sites, including this one, by all modes of travel. So I think the answer to your question is yes.
Thank you. Then just to follow up, because it feels slightly subjective and I just want to understand. So we've talked about 1.2 kilometres to walk from Newbury College to the new site and how doable that is. Now, 1.2 kilometres in my head is about 3/4 of a mile. We ask primary school children to walk 2 miles or 3 miles, depending on, well, 2 miles for primary, 3 miles for secondary. And I'm just wondering who defines the length that it's appropriate to walk from one car park to a site, because I feel that's quite subjective, and I just want to understand if there's actually a set measurement that's put in place for that.
There is a set measurement. The Institute of Incorporated Highway Engineers some years ago established a maximum walking distance of 2 kilometres and a maximum cycle distance of 5 kilometres. So yes, Newbury College is well within that range. Now, I did choose my words quite carefully earlier on when I spoke. I didn't necessarily say that people wouldn't walk 1.2 kilometres. What I did say is that they wouldn't walk that far if there were alternative places for them to park, such as residential streets that are nearby that are closer.
Thank you, Mr. Goddard.
Councillor Dockley. Mr. Goddard, whilst I have you there and broadly on that point, can you tell us what parking restrictions there are currently on Monks Lane?
There aren't any, and I think Councillor Marsh made a very good point earlier on. And I considered, what I did is I got a compass and I drew a distance around the site and included all the streets within it. I didn't include Monks Lane because I felt surely that people wouldn't park on it, but they might. Therefore, if members feel it's appropriate, then I have no objection to having Monks Lane added to those list of streets that are set out in condition 10 before you.
Thank you, Mr. Goddard. That's something we can leave to the debate in a little while. Councillor Abbs, I know you have a long list.
I will try and I'll try and rush them. First of all, the MPPF state developments of this type should be sustainable. Could the relevant officer confirm that costs associated with developments are therefore a planning matter to be considered along with the business case for such a development?
Mr. Till, thank you. Mr. Till.
I think in this case, Chairman, I'll defer to Mr. Masiwa, who's made the detailed consideration of this planning.
Thank you very much. Mr. Masiwa.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Councillor Abbs. The cost of the development and sustainability is a matter that's not in our development plan policies, but it's a matter that's within the Sport England planning policies when they're considering such facilities. Hence, the business plan was submitted at their request. The main reason for a business plan is to ensure that the facility is sustainable, that it can be available long-term for the set purpose. So in terms of the business plan, that was considered by Sport England in terms of their sustainability and consultation with the Football Association. From our point of view, as I indicated in our presentation, policy CS18 doesn't make reference to cost or business plans.
Thank you. My reading said that the MPPF states developments of this type should be sustainable as well. It's not just Sport England, which obviously MPPF trumps everything else we've got. So can you confirm that, please?
Yes, the NPPF is a material consideration.
That's fine.
In planning matters. But
if we try and go through, I'm just looking for confirmation some of the stuff I'm asking, and then when I come to debate, I'll know what I can and can't.
Thank you, Councillor Abbs. I'm going to move to, I know you have further questions, but just to spread this out a little further, Chancellor Vickers.
That last question, Chairman, was the one I was going to ask about economic sustainability.
Thank you very much. We'll move this on. Councillor Rolls, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Can I just ask a quick clarification question of officers in relation to the consultation with the care home? Was that part of the wider consultation, basically?
Who'd like to take that? Mr. Masiwa?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Rolls. Yes, in terms of the current notification and consultation process for planning applications, we don't neighbour notify anymore as a council, but we posted a site notice. I think you may have seen it when I pointed it out on one of my images, which was right at the access. And as indicated by the number of representations we received, I think the planning notice was successful in notifying the adjacent neighbours in terms of the application.
Councillor Rose, are you happy with that?
Yeah, for now, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Abbs.
Yeah, thank you. I just point members back to this, this particular page here, because 6.51 states that the rugby club has provision of 280 vehicles. We've since heard that it's only 30 that are allocated. However, Mr. Mazay will remember at the site visit that I was less confident about this 280 spaces being available and asked if we could walk down and have a look ourselves. And if you look at this diagram, ladies and gentlemen, you will see the car parking that they are referring to. If you add up the car parking spaces on this, and this is why I'd like officers to confirm, I can only count 105.
So, do you want to pick up on Mr. Goddard, in fact? Would you rather pick that up?
Chairman, I've counted them. Or the surfaced car park and the overflow gravel car park, I believe has the measurements I took has the capacity for 283 cars.
83.
283. That includes obviously parking for disabled persons, and it includes 6 coaches. Or you can have 307 spaces and no coaches.
Excellent. Right. I noted 5 coach spaces myself, Mr. Goddard, but thank you.
I think we'll defer to Mr. Goddard and his...
well, no. I think there's more clarification needed, I'm afraid, Chairman, because the gravel area you're referring to is marked off as staff only. Correct?
The gravel area is marked.
The overflow gravel area at the bottom. It's difficult for me to show it to you, but you've got this in front of everybody's got this in their pack. It's the area right to the south of the development, and it looks empty. There's no cars in it because if you go up to it, it's got a big sign on it saying staff only. So the gravel area you're referring to, Mr. Goddard, can you confirm that is in fact marked as staff only and therefore in theory might at some point become available under special circumstance, but isn't really?
Well, my understanding is that all of it's available for when matches are on, including rugby matches and possibly also football matches.
Well, you can understand why I wanted clarification on this, Chairman, I'm sure. So,
and your hand's still raised.
Yeah, I'm afraid I'm just getting going. But if anybody else wants to jump in with others, they are all pertinent. I'm sure the members will find each of the questions interesting, especially this business of walking. Now, I don't know who else uses Google, but I think pretty much that whole series is the default way of calculating how long it's going to take to get from A to B. So what I'd like to understand from officers is what tool did they use that counters that simple Google calculation that says it's in fact 18 minutes from a... Sorry, Councillor Doctor, you're more than welcome to ask a question in a minute, but if I could get officers to answer how they calculated this.
We'll keep questions very concise, please. So the answer is, how is that calculated? Mr. Goddard, is that with you?
Chairman, I didn't make that calculation. Whether it was the highway consultants that did or the planning officers that did. But I believe I've referred to this distance quite a bit under earlier questions.
Yeah, 0.9 miles or 1.2 kilometres.
Something you want to pick up?
I can refer that question to the case officer, Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Masiwa?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As indicated in the report and the update sheet, the calculation was submitted by the transport consultants, and in terms of the walking distance. We did have a conversation with Councillor Abbs at the committee site visit, which is why we sought clarification in the update sheet on that matter. I also did a Google on it, as indicated in the update sheet. I did check it, and it came up to 15 minutes. And that was 15 minutes from the car park at Newbury College to the site access for the proposed development. I do believe that the 18 minutes was actually from the car park, from the college to the car park and the rugby club. So it does vary, Mr. Chairman, and that's why I indicated in the update sheet that the consideration is an approximate, and it's for members to have an idea of what is the walking distance in arriving at their decision this evening. Thank you.
Mr. Councillor Abbs.
Yeah, just a very small one. I think Mazzy just said it. The reason there's a difference is because it's measured from car park to car park as opposed to point of entry to point of entry. And it's the car park to car park that's actually going to be used. But we'll come back to that and debate, I'm sure. I'm very interested. Nobody's really described, and it's very impertinent to understand the fencing that's currently planned and the fencing that's needed at step 4 and how close it is to the edge of the pitch. Because the diagrams, again, if I look at the eastern side, show that I can't even see a metre gap between the edge of the runoff area on the pitch and the red line, which I assume is where the fence is. That must be go around the whole ground. Right.
So the question is where?
So what is the fence construction, and really how far is it from the runoff area to the actual fence line itself?
Mr. Masiwa, can you clarify?
Yes, the fence is as indicated on the plans. It follows the red line, and we do have. I think I did include it in the papers.
If it helps you, Mazzy, I'm particularly concerned about the eastern side.
In terms of what is the concern specifically, Councillor?
Well, I mean, I didn't want to. This is more for debate than it is now. I just wanted the answer to the question answered.
Whilst we have our case officer here, I think Mr. Masiwa, if it's possible to get that slide up on screen.
While he's doing that, I can explain what my concern is, if that helped. But normally that's reserved for debate. So
just a question will be fine. Thank you very much. Councillor Vickers, whilst we're digging away for a slide, Mr. Masiwa, is that okay if you?
Yep, thank you, Chairman.
Can pull that slide up.
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I'll take a question from Councillor Vickers.
Thank you, Chairman. Simple question. Definition of playing pitch. Am I right in thinking that it's more than just the actual pitch, in this case, a 3G pitch, that includes the associated facilities, including perhaps a clubhouse, changing rooms, fence, car parking, all of that? Is that correct? It's not just the pitch. Is that a question?
So would you like to take that?
I can't, I'm afraid, provide a direct answer to that question, Chairman. However, I can provide an answer in respect of the fact that Sports England have certain requirements for a playing pitch, and that does include associated facilities.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Mr. Masiwa, how are you doing with the IT?
I can share my screen, Mr. Chairman.
If you would, please.
Thank you. Right. Is this the plan you're referring to, Councillor Abbs?
Not quite. It's
but I think we can.
It's close.
It's possible to.
It's close to answer the question. If you look to the right-hand side of this image that we're looking at, we see the red line but would seem to now be on the boundary of the runoff area of the football pitch. Or maybe, I'm not sure, I don't see the red line of the application clearly enough to be able to judge it properly. But it seems to be, if we're going to have a requirement for spectators on 3 sides of this proposal, some seated on the northern end, how on earth are they going to even stand on, well, there's no area for them to stand.
Yes, I mean, I think, like I explained before, Sport England are the statutory consultee when it comes to these facilities, and they do indeed assess matters such as runoff space for the sports activities. And they haven't raised an objection on this. So I would assume that the amount of runoff is acceptable. And as indicated previously, they've also indicated that the proposed development is designed to a step 4 facility. Unfortunately, they haven't included any comments about standing spectators. So the ground guidance only requires that the capacity is assessed by a competent person. And as I indicated previously, we consider that Sport England are the statutory, and they would be a competent person to do those assessments. So we have no reason to oppose their conclusions.
Thank you, Mr.
Well,
Masiwa.
the obvious question, therefore, is did Sport England visit the site, or was this a remote evaluation?
I wouldn't know, Councillor Abbs.
So I'll have to assume they didn't.
Well, they assessed the proposal in accordance with their own procedures.
And they would have, if I may, Mr. Masiwa, they would have had full sight of the plans as we have this evening also.
Yes, they would have.
Okay. Next, I'd like to go into biodiversity, and I asked it for. We said we'd come back to clarification of the calculation and how we're going to achieve the 1.1.
Okay, I'll go to Councillor Hooker first.
Oh, so sorry. Yeah, I didn't see Councillor Hooker's hand. Apologise.
Councillor Hooker.
Mr. Musawi, can you remind me what's the capacity of the stadium, please? Seated.
268.
It's 268 spectators in the stand, Councillor Hooker.
Thank you. And can you give me an indication of what the possible current number of spectators that turn up to watch on a Saturday at Newbury?
From the submission in the application, consultations with Newbury Football Club indicated that they're currently getting about 50 people attending their current matches.
Would you consider those 50 could be accommodated in the stadium as it is currently?
They can be accommodated, that's correct.
Would you agree with me then the amount of standing room around the pitch at the moment is slightly irrelevant?
I would say, yes, I would say it is slightly irrelevant.
Time, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hooker. Councillor Abbs.
Yeah, I'll save my return comments for Councillor Hooker on that one for debate. But
okay.
yeah,
are we done with questions of clarification?
No, not on that particular point. I have another question.
If we can keep them pithy, Councillor Abbs, please.
Well, thank you. My question I started to ask, so if it could be answered, the one to do with the biodiversity calculation. Thank you.
Mr. Masiwa.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, thank you, Councillor Abbs. I can confirm that the applicant did carry out a biodiversity net gain metric calculation. I actually don't have the figure in terms of quantifying the net gain, but our council ecologist was happy with the amount of additional planting proposed as indicated on the plan that I showed in presentation. I think the starting point in terms of the concerns from a biodiversity point of view was the loss of the existing grass pitch. So I think in terms of quantifying what is being added, I think the net gain is sufficient.
just like I said, there's an online calculator that you can use to come up to that conclusion. But okay, and I do have another one related to Sports England, because obviously they did a joint statement with you, and that was part of the papers. So it's now part for information and so on and so forth. This would have been some time ago. Has anybody, given the change and that now we're trying to push this through as a step 6 only solution today, has anybody gone back to Sport England to check, in fact, that what they said still holds true? Because originally they had concerns, and then a whole bunch of assurances were given. Yeah, it's kind of debate, but has anybody gone back in the last 24, 48 hours since we've changed what's being presented and said, is this still true? Are you still in the same position?
Chairman, if I may answer in respect of that. The joint declaration is a declaration of the council's intent for this site. That intent to meet the requirements of the playing pitch statement, playing pitch strategy, sorry. And that is the council's intent as a development organisation. So the changes to the report are simply for purposes of clarity. They are not going to affect Sports England's position, because Sports England's position is on the basis of considering the playing pitch strategy. What has been stated in the joint declaration outside is purely for the purpose of the matter of the replacement of the Faraday Road Stadium, which is within the playing pitch strategy. But that is not what you're being asked to consider tonight, Chairman. What you're being asked to consider is whether this facility might have the potential to meet with that requirement. Chairman, members approved another facility at the last meeting with the potential to meet that requirement, and another facility may come forward before the playing pitch strategy is satisfied. So there was no requirement to reconsult with Sport England regarding the alteration, because there was no requirement from Sport England for inclusion of the joint statement within the conditions of the planning permission, which is what change has been made.
Thank you, Mr. Till. I'm going to go to Councillor Hooker. An old hand. Councillor Abbs, I sense you still.
I did have some more, but I think for the sense of our sanity, I think we should. I can make a lot of the points in debate. Unfortunately, they won't be able to be clarified by officers in debate. But time is running, so let's get to debate.
And thank you very much. And with that in mind, I will open the debate, and I'll take first hand, Councillor Abbs.
Thanks. Okay, so. Faraday Road and the linkage to this development, despite this document being moved to informative, there are still 14 different locations in our pack this evening which mention Faraday Road. Monks Lane is mentioned 17 times. So basically, Faraday Road is mentioned as much as Monks Lane. We've also had the very clear and very strong statement from the portfolio holder that this is a step 4 facility, not a step 6 as per the application, and therefore I should be considering this and all of the conditions associated with it as a step 4 facility. Bit of a surprise when he took that position, because I thought, at the site visit we were meant to be considering as a step 6, but he was very clear on the step 4 thing, so let's go with that. I then go on to look quite a lot. I made some notes for myself. 6.8 page 51 clearly states that this should have the ability to develop to a step 5. So we're already pitching at step 4, but I assume we would be building up from step 6. But anyway, even in that feedback, it says that even if it's a step 6, you have to be ready for step 5. And why is that important? Is when you start to look at the size of an adult football pitch, including the runoff, which is 116 yards by 76 yards. And then you plot that down on this location. And as you can see from the diagram that's shared with us, it's shoehorned in. And the problem with it is when you start looking at step 654, the documents are clear about what grade of ground it should be, what step level is associated, what ground. Therefore, it says, and it's very clear on this, that you must have the ability to have spectators, not on one side, but by the time we get to step 4, on 3 sides. And here we have an application that has a technical area at the bottom, the southern side, which is off out of bounds for everybody, basically, it seems. And if you did run that way, you'd fall over the edge of a cliff anyway. So thank God there's a fence there that people can bounce off. But if you do these 3 sides, one of them's got a big building sitting on it, and the other side has no room to stand behind the offering. So in other words, the application has brought for us this evening can't fit on the amount of space successfully. And that's all related to Sports England, Football Association. Just read the documents. I know it's a bit boring, but read them all, and the numbers are all there, black and white, to say this does not really fit, especially when you start talking about a level 4. And then we go on, of course, to talk about, and step 6 also takes in it, at step 6, it says, note that a grade D pitch it should be taken into account. So they're already thinking ahead. A grade D pitch links to level 4, sorry, step 4, and step 4 is 1,300 spectators. So actually what we're being asked to is not what the current level of playing is going on at step 7, but we're being asked to approve an application that is absolutely in the minds of the portfolio holder going to be a step 4. In the documentation is clearly put forward as a replacement for Faraday Road. And I just can't get away with it because it's mentioned too many times in the document. And therefore we have to look at the parking arrangement, and Mr. Goddard should be looking at this not from a step 6 perspective and what the traffic will be. And it's pointless putting all those conditions in after the fact that we might check it and then see if it's okay. And because you're just experimenting on people. What the people actually want is a clearly thought out program that allows them to go to step 4 if that's what is actually required here. And that means we've got to accommodate 1,300 spectators, up to, sorry. And of course, we then have the horrible news that, in fact, we don't even have 280 parking spaces on site. We've only got 30 allocated, added to the 52. And, which means that the slightest issue that we have with a junior club playing at the same time as an adult club, and they're changing rapidly, we're just easily, if you look at a football match, that calculation of 52 adds up to the players, the staff, the referees, and a couple of other people. So it's all taken without any spectator. So there's no spectator parking accounted for there. That has to be somewhere else. And 30 parking spaces allocated down at the rugby club certainly can't do it for 1,300 potentially spectators. Okay, Sport England is also clear in the response that the site must be able to develop to step 5. I've said that. It requires a category F pitch, and I'm getting down there now. Clear, have I made all the points I wanted to make? Yes, actually, I want to compare it a little bit with Thatcham. Why Thatcham? Thatcham operates at
I think this is your last point before we move on to, and you can.
I didn't think there was. Is there a time limit on speaking?
No, there isn't, Council. No, I'll come back to you. I'll come back to you after.
Okay.
After this point, just to allow the other members in.
I realise that it's a lot, but I spent a lot of time trying to come to a balanced decision on what this, and I've heard nothing that alters what I've heard.
No.
That's why there were so many questions. I wanted to be 100% clear that a clear mind was supposed to do this with, and given all of these anomalies, I'm left with a real, I'm really concerned. So I'll finish off with Thatcham for the moment. Thatcham, the last decent season that anybody had was 2019, 2020. And they're a step 4, and they quite happily got 661 as their gate. So we know that these numbers, you can see why the FA are demanding 1,300 spaces, because you're just a slightly bigger game, and you're going to easily reach this. So we know from the people who live there, we know that from Thatcham as an example, that the numbers are horrible once you start getting to step 4. This is a step 4 facility, not a step 6. And therefore, I will have to urge everybody to listen to the points I've made. This application needs to be redone. And remember, I did say originally in the positive part that everybody is in support of more 3G grounds. It's not standing here saying no ground and no ground here. It's just not this ground in this design here at this time. Thank you very much.
Councillor Culver.
Thank you, Chairman. As I said at the start of the meeting this evening, I was lobbied on this, but I came along with a completely open mind. Part of me sick to death of hearing about this topic, to be quite honest, and I'll be very pleased when it's over and done with. I don't think there's a problem with expecting people to walk. When I used to go to Reading, I used to walk about 1.5 miles. We've got a problem with obesity in this country, which has grown since COVID. So I think it's entirely reasonable that people should be expected to walk. However, I think the meeting tonight has had an extremely poor tone. I've got residents from my own ward watching this, anticipating the discussion of the Compton Institute application. And I think this is an extremely poor example of how a planning meeting is run. People have been talking over the top of each other. We've had somebody speak who wasn't on the list of speakers, and my understanding has always been that they should be on the list of speakers, and that particular individual saw fit to laugh at me. But anyway, I'll make my final point, Chairman. Thank you. I don't feel as if I can vote on this evening, because we have been told by the agent, Mr. Smith, that it's definitely going to be suitable for step 4. Great. We understand that step 4 means 1,300 people. We know at the moment that only 50 to 100 people go. Councillor Hooker quite rightly asked the question about how many people can sit in the stand, and on the face of it, you would think 268 is fine if only 50 or 100 people are going. But if we are to believe that this is a step 4 site and vote on that basis, how can 1,300 people be fitted into that site? Councillor Wollaston said it would be on the assumption that people would stand around the other sides of the pitch. And as I said earlier, we've got a car park on one side, we've got a slope on another side with runoff, and we've got an existing rugby pitch close to the other. So I am left in a situation as a councillor where I don't know how to vote on this, because people have contradicted themselves all evening.
Councillor Culver. Councillor Vickers.
Gentlemen, I hope I can help Councillor Culver to bring a bit of clarity to this. As we've heard, sustainable development in the NPPF means that it has to be sustainable economically, socially, and environmentally. I'm going to put it to you, Chairman, members, that there's no way this can be considered sustainable in any of those 3 ways. Now, we've heard about Faraday Road, and I know we're not talking about it necessarily being a replacement, but that is one of the 2 scenarios. And we have to look at the scenario where it's not a replacement, it's a standalone. A standalone facility, potentially for step 4, but if another development achieves better, still there, still a built form with a commitment that is economically unsustainable. There is no way, even if it achieves what the council has said it wishes to achieve, that this is ever going to be able to wash its face economically. So I would say that it is economically sustainable, unsustainable, full stop. It's going to be the council underwriting the costs. The council has a duty to do a lot of other things for its residents besides this. So it's perfectly possible that in the 10 administrations for this council, between now and the end of the 40-year lease, there may be a council that says, stop it, we're not going to subsidise it anymore, in which case it's even more economically unsustainable. But that's perfectly possible, the way council funding is going. So on planning grounds, if being economically sustainable is something we've got to see, then it's not. Now, socially, what was at Faraday Road that was given asset of community value, which we're supposed to be seeing replaced somewhere, somehow, like for like? Maybe not on this application, but maybe on this application. We've got both scenarios. There is no way that when you look at the plans, it's only a heating up facility. It's not a full kitchen. It has nowhere near the same size of function rooms. And anyway, at this part of Newbury, right next to the rugby club, which has got a much better offer, there's no need for a social function, which is an essential part of a successful football club if it's going to stack up economically. So whatever club operates out of this ground is never going to be able to make the same social offer. And therefore, I would claim that this is not a socially sustainable development. As I say, it's going to be built form that has that meets no real identified need. And there's not much that I need to say about the environmental sustainability. It is mainly tied up with traffic and parking, well, parking in particular. And again, comparing with the alternative, there's just no comparison. So why are we doing it when we're imposing unsustainable development in all three of its meanings upon the future administrations of this council if we approve this? That's really all I need to say, I think.
Thank you, Councillor Vickers. I've got Councillor Barnett next.
Well, firstly, a question for you, Chairman. I mean, it's nearly 9:10. I hope we can have a break after the end of this application. And I take it we just about have enough time for the second application. And I think to make a comment to Councillor Colville, I think it would be fair on the residents of Compton at this stage to tell them that it's very unlikely we're going to get to their application tonight.
I'll hold you just there, Councillor. Return to Mr. Till. I think it's most likely, given the conclusion of this this agenda item and possibly the next one, that it is most unlikely that we'll be able to get on to.
Chairman, I would conclude the same thing, that I don't think we've got enough time for three items at this stage. Members may wish to consider whether they would prefer to swap the two agenda items, but I would suggest that the Pirbright item may well be a lengthy item, so we probably don't have time for that.
I think, given the fact that we're not at the end of this particular item and the length of time, I hope the committee would like to spend on the Pirbright application. That
would it help, Chairman, if I used my speech, concluded my speech with a proposal that we refuse this application to move things on, if that finds a seconder?
I've got
Chairman,
I was halfway through. Councillor Barnett, Councillor Vickers.
Yeah, Chairman, members. I mean, I've looked very closely at this application, and I see the real need for more football pitches, and I think I think we owe it to the residents to actually try and succeed with producing a suitable pitch, which in a suitable place, which residents would benefit. But I'm still not convinced that this site is the ideal one that we should be considering. We've had all these discussions about what particular grade that we're hoping to get this football pitch to. And I would obviously hope that it would be upgraded and lower numbered to a facility which would be more in line and more appropriate for what Newbury needs. But having said that, I don't think really the size is ideal at this particular point. My main concern obviously is very much related to the traffic movements and the car parking. Many of you know that I am an old wash commoner, and I benefited from Monk's Lane being an old little narrow lane in the 60s, when I probably was the only person that walked along there without any lights, worrying in case I get knocked over by a cyclist, not yet alone a vehicle. And I've seen it actually get to a point where it's been obviously widened, appropriate footpaths and well lit up. But over the decades, the number of vehicles that have increased along that road is phenomenal. There's only certain times of the day when you can actually exceed the speed limit. I know Thames Valley Police at one time were regularly monitoring speed, but they only did it out of the rush hour period, because other times people were crawling along there, and they crawl along there on a regular basis. And even in the last day or so, when there's been traffic problems with the utilities. But the access onto this particular site by the surgery and the pharmacy is not an ideal one. It was laid out incorrectly in the first place. The parking is incorrect. It's not ideal to park anywhere in that facility. It's difficult to get out the Priory. It's difficult to get out of the nursing home. And we're going to expect more vehicles to be using this particular road. And obviously the car parking, which we've had a discussion about tonight, about ideal numbers. My suspicion is that the numbers that are quoted are not actually taken in consideration of the ambulance ambulance vehicles, and all the other training vehicles that are used on that particular rugby site. And I suspect at the end of the day that if we are hoping, if this planning application was to succeed, we're hoping to see that particular pitch brought up to the standard that we would expect. And the large number of vehicles that would generate, I'm afraid to say people are not going to park in the college. Whether we like it or not, they're going to be lazy. What do people do when they come to a site, to a particular event at the last minute? We've seen it around schools. We've seen it around different events. They park wherever they can. And what would it be? It'd be the poor devils of Heather Gardens, Sutherland's, Monk's Lane. That's where they would be parking. So I'm sorry, I'm not going to be supporting it tonight. If you're putting a proposal, Tony, Councillor Vickers, I'm more than happy to second that proposal.
Thank you, Councillor Barnett. We'll cross that bridge in a little while. I go to Councillor Cole.
Thank you, Chairman. I think my view on this application is a little bit different. As I'm reading this, we have an application for a step 6 with the capability of moving to step 4. The basic parking requirement for normal usage of 80 should be adequate. We have no clash on match days, and therefore the additional parking will be available. The question of the college parking, we've been told it's 3/4 of a mile away. Well, the average human at 4 miles an hour, that comes to something like 11, 12 minutes, and I can probably do it in 10. All right, I've got longer legs, but that's the way it is. Yes, that is perfectly feasible. The lighting issue, I'm quite certain that that can be dealt with. We know about that one. No, I think I'm actually in favour of this. Bearing in mind the other application that we're not allowed to mention was acceptable in planning terms. I think it's the same here, that this one is acceptable in planning terms, and that's what we're voting on. So I would be perfectly happy to propose that we accept this.
Well, yes, we'll sit tight on those. We have a proposal pending at the other end of the chamber. I'm going to go first to Councillor Abbs.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Just to help Councillor Cole out a little bit, it's not 3/4 of a mile; it's 0.9 of a mile. So it just adds a few more minutes to the journey. I realise not a lot, but that is material when people are kind of making decisions. The thing I wanted to come on to say was that it seems to me that the Sport England predicated their much of their response on this being eventually a replacement for Faraday Road, and the strategy document that's shared with them, and to be clear and transparent, I also had a conversation with Bob Sharples at Sport England some time ago, trying to get some clarity on why they changed their mind about supporting applications and so on. So I understand where they're coming from, and it seems to be all based on some promises that eventually this will become the replacement, and yet we're not considering that as a replacement. Therefore, I have to throw all of what they said out the window. The real thing that's surprising me here, and I think members need to keep in mind that we have an opinion about this is an acceptable ground. I've read you chapter and verse out from the FA's documents as to why this is not. So it's really unclear to me is why a remote review of this application by Sports England has suddenly decided that it's acceptable. Councillor Vickers made the point about sustainability, and I would have made the same points if he hadn't made it. There isn't a great deal of council money needed to make this work. And I have to link it back to Faraday Road because everything else links back to it. So therefore, there are different applications that are much more sustainable at a different location for different reasons. We may have, as a council, at a different level, a reason why we don't want that, but on purely planning terms is a far better. And just to add that, I was approached actually not that long ago, and so was Councillor Wollaston and some others by the Newbury College, and they were coming forward with land south of their building as a viable alternative as well. Now, that's not before us this evening, so we can't really discuss it, but I can assure you it's bigger and better.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. I'm going to move on to, and forgive me if I have this wrong, Councillor Doherty or Councillor Rolls. I'm not sure which of you were. Councillor Doherty.
Thank you. I'm going to look at this purely in planning terms and what we've had presented tonight. And I have come to this with an open mind, and it's been a really interesting conversation. I'm actually going to listen to the officers and the consultees such as Sports England. So when we talk about what is and isn't feasible, I think that there is west side, north side is an opportunity to stand and look at that. So I'm actually going to follow the guidance that I've had tonight from my officers here in West Berkshire and from Sports England as a statutory consultee. And I'm quite satisfied with that, and I'm quite happy to actually accept this proposal this evening. The one concern I have, and I hear that time and time again, is around the parking and around the potential impact on the highways. And actually, I can see that Mr. Goddard has put together a really strong condition around that, and I think that that's right. He and I will probably never agree that I'm completely with Councillor Cole on this one. I find it quite funny, actually, probably not funny, that people that talk about a climate emergency don't actually have the ambition to get people out of their cars and walking. It's great to pay lip service to something, but if you don't actually enable them and give them those nudging factors, and I'm sure Councillor Culver will agree, if you don't nudge them and encourage them and get them out of their cars, how on earth are we going to get people to reconsider the use of cars in the first place? So I think that's my biggest concern with regards to this in planning terms. However, I think there's a really strong condition put in there from Mr. Goddard. And I think with that condition, I'm happy to support this and be talking in favour of this application this evening.
Thank you, Councillor Doherty. I'm going to come to Councillor Hook in a moment. I just note Mr. Till's hand.
Thank you, Chairman. Chairman, it's a point of clarity, and it arrives on the back of Councillor Vickers and Councillor Abb's comments. They've both referred to Faraday Road, and I would like to clarify and remind members that they are not being asked as part of this planning decision to decide between the development of Faraday Road or the development of Monks Lane.
Mr. Tell, thank you very much for clarification there. Councillor Rolls.
Thank you, Chair. I have to say, just looking at this in pure planning terms, and actually the call-in states to review the parking allocation for the new use. And if you look at that parking allocation, I have a lot of faith in Mr. Goddard, always have, in terms of his recommendations. And I can't see, having asked a number of questions around specifically the parking, that this is going to cause a massive issue. We should be encouraging people to walk. We should be encouraging people to car share. We are assuming everyone's going to drive to the match from the centre of town as well. We should be putting in some incentives for people not to drive. But actually, just picking up on Mr. Goddard's point, if members are minded to approve this, I do think we need to look at the Monks Lane restrictions, because I think that sight line, when you pull out the potential for cars parked along there, would be a complete disaster. So I think I would only be comfortable if there was a condition around Monks Lane having restrictions, and also just to at least meet the residents in terms of some of their concerns, and one of which was the lighting. I think that is something that we could do more around, and I think in fact we would welcome the opportunity to improve the current situation. Thank you.
Councillor Rolls. Councillor Hooker, forgive me, I managed to avoid you there. Councillor Hooker.
Thank you, Chairman. Chairman, it's been a most interesting debate tonight, and I think we've debated this left, right, centre, north, south, east and west, everything around and including policy. A lot of this has been opinion, which if some of these presentations had been given by the public, it would have gone right over our head and said not relevant to our considerations with regards to planning issues. But there we are. I think that this facility will provide a first-class sports pitch, clubhouse, stadium, parking for football, rugby and other sports activities. Tonight, the whole issue has been around football. If this goes down, kids for training, other activities of lacrosse, I don't know what else can be played on an all-weather pitch, but it is a marvellous facility. In planning terms, our policies, there is, in my view, no reason to refuse this application. The issues of parking, walking, trees, lighting, flooding, I could go on, have been questioned prior to this meeting, at the site meeting, all of which have been addressed by Highways, Mr. Goddard, and the planning officers in their reports and here at the meeting tonight. I think this is a wonderful opportunity to provide Newbury and its surrounding district a first-class, state-of-the-art sports playing facility, and should be embraced, approved and taken forward for the benefit of our youth and adult sports players as soon as possible. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Hooker. I'm going to wrap this up very soon. I've just got Councillor Cole.
It's an old hand, but I deliberately left it up. If you don't mind, Chairman, as my mathematics was questioned, the 3/4 of a mile came because I heard us told that it was 1.2 kilometres. If it really was 1.2 kilometres, that's pretty close to 3/4 of a mile. Do the maths.
It's not the maths, it's the distance.
And anyway, it is as we've been told, we have actually got to get people out of their cars, whether we like it or not. Councillor Abbs, you of all people know that. So we may have to...
Personal comments aren't really appropriate.
I take that.
I'll take that one back. I'm sorry, there is no real planning reason not to put this through. I would like to propose that we put this through.
Okay, well, Councillor Cole, thank you. Councillor Cole, thank you very much. I had a pending proposal from the Vice Chairman of Western Area, Councillor Vickers.
And let the motion be put, Chairman. I mean, you've got one proposal which has been seconded, and another one which I'm sure will follow up if necessary.
That's a proposal then for refusal of officers' recommendation. Councillor Barnett, was that it was so long ago? Were you seconding?
Sorry, Chairman. Yeah, I mean, I thought Councillor Vickers had actually put it as a form of proposal, and I said I would second.
We let it roll. Thank you, Councillor Barnett. Okay, I have a proposal and a seconder for a refusal of officers' recommendation on this application. Does that find favour with the committee, please? I have Councillor Vickers, Culver, Abbs and Barnett. Jack. You want that recorded, Councillor Vickers?
Well, you don't normally read out names, but you...
I was just for Mr.
Okay.
Karimi's benefit.
If that would be minuted, that would be very much appreciated.
Thank you. Okay. That does not... yes, that doesn't find favour with the committee. I'll take a proposal, contra proposal.
Chairman, you haven't asked for those against.
I do apologise. Thank you very much. I'll take a show of hands against the proposal. And that is 5. Mr. Karimi, thank you very much. No abstention, that was everyone. I did hear a proposal from Councillor Cole And does that find a seconder? Councillor Hooker. And members, I'll take a show of hands, please, on the accepting officer's recommendation. And against? Members, thank you very much. Members of the public, thank you very much indeed. And
Chairman,
Sorry,
it's not appropriate time to then take a vote on whether this should be now taken up to district planning.
Chair, may I just make a point on the application? Are we going to look at those conditions outside?
I do apologise. It wasn't. Wasn't the proposal. Councillor Rolls made the observation and the request, in fact, that the
Regarding Monks Lane and the lighting.
Chairman, I think even we would accept that the debate produced some new or amended conditions. I'm sure they should go with it.
Councillor, Mr. Till, would those?
I believe that the lighting concerns are actually addressed in a condition already. And in respect of Monks Lane, I believe that that was the tone of the debate prior to the proposal.
Mr. Presentation suggested that Monks Lane could be looked at.
I believe so, and it certainly can be included in the condition.
So, Chairman, I think we've got a kind of an issue here. We went straight from one proposal to the other. There is debate to be had and conditions that, in the effect of an approval, that could be being added. I have conditions that in that situation that should be added, and we haven't even debated going for it. We had a proposal and we carried on debating, against it.
Thank you. I've taken advice from legal on that, councillor.
What is the advice?
We waited for the debate to take place, with a proposal in place, sort of pending. No hands were raised at the end of that debate, and everybody had waited. And the second proposal was made during that debate as well. So we can't have another debate.
So why in a debate would I raise conditions on an approval when we were debating the refusal of the application? That doesn't make any sense.
They had all been debated.
We cannot lumber the people of my ward with this kind of application without some serious care taken to the conditions. We must have the power as Western Area Planning to defer up if we've messed it up, and it feels like we've messed it up a bit, or if at least not, go through and ask for the conditions that will be associated with the approval. There's nothing unusual in asking for additional conditions.
The proposal was made, it was seconded, and everybody voted. You can't go back afterwards. I think it's accepted.
Well, I'm sorry, but we had a council meeting just the other week where we just that. We went backwards. So I'm sorry, you can't say that.
I think with respect, Chairman, there were conditions debated, and I think, in fact, they were collated, were they not, by either Mr. Masawi?
That was my understanding,
I will agree, though, they weren't actually collated at the end of the debate to say, do we agree those? But I think they were within the debate.
In trying to tie up the debate, it was my fault for not adding the conditions as discussed at the end of the just prior to the vote. I think we've managed to incorporate those conditions, which
we have not, Chairman, because I've had a condition, especially related to condition 10, which basically goes on about adult play, and it needs to be altered to be clear that this isn't just that we mustn't have competing adult play. If we're going for this to work at all, it mustn't have any competing matches.
Councillor Abbs, indeed, it's not your proposal, and as such, it falls to the councillor proposing to make those conditional requests. I do apologise, Councillor Cole.
Perhaps we could have a list of the conditions that Mr. Masiwa has in fact collated, or perhaps Mr. Till could give us those.
So, Chairman, if that advice is sought, then the conditions as proposed were the conditions were those recommended by the case officer, with the addition of Monk's Lane to consideration of the parking strategy condition 10, I believe that is, Chairman.
Indeed. Members, thank you very much. Members of the public, thank you very much. That was covered in the.
Sorry, Chairman. Yes, there is a condition in respect of external lighting already in the list.
Thank you very much indeed. Okay, if members would like to take a very, very short comfort break, I think when we come back from the comfort break, we'll have to still vote on whether we take business up to 10:30 and also to axe the final agenda item.
We could vote now, but unfortunately, just a second.
Chairman, I'm just getting some more.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Hook. Members, thank you very much. The first thing I think we need to do is to vote on extending this meeting up to a maximum of 10:30. I'd like to propose that we do, that we might get at least one more agenda item complete. Thank you, Councillor Rolls, seconded, and members, a show of hands, please. Unanimous. Thank you very much indeed.
Chairman, before we go on, there was a proposal to request deferment of the previous application up to district planning that never got discussed. And I did bring it up before the meeting started as well to make sure that it would be discussed. Is that not going to be discussed at all?
No, it's not.
No.
In short, no. Item, Mr. Masiwa, do we have you back in the building?
Oh. Yes, Mr. Chairman.
And are you ready to begin your presentation, please?
Sorry, yeah, Chair, on number 3, are we not going to?
We won't have, yes, exactly. We won't have a chance to.
So that will be deferred to the next meeting?
I think that, I'll defer to Mr. Till here. He has indicated to me, I think, that the first possible opportunity that can come to this committee would be the 12th of January. Is that correct?
That is the first possible opportunity, Chairman, and in practical terms, officers will do their best to ensure that it finds its way there if it is possible.
And Councillor Culver, you have my apologies.
No problem. Yeah, I don't think we're going to get through it in 50 minutes anyway. So.
No, can I make a suggestion, Chair? I know there's a number of members that didn't make the site visit, whether it would be possible to arrange another formal site visit for those that didn't attend, because I think that actually that would be to everybody's advantage.
Thank you, Councillor.
I think it's a nice idea, but I think we've got to be very careful here because we have another site meeting. I think we really ought to be looking at the parish council turning up. I think we ought to be looking at the objectors and the supporters turning up. We've got to organise risk assessment and paperwork to get into the site. Homes England will have to be there because 4 of us, or whoever it was, went round. We had a very long discussion with regards to that application. What we've got to watch here is it's not compulsory for members to turn up to site meetings. It's an obligation. Members didn't turn up, and in fact, you, Chairman, and I chaired that day. I didn't receive, I think, one apology from a member to say that he wasn't coming to that meeting. It's our members' fault that they didn't turn up. And I think if we set a precedent to say only 4 turned up for this, and this is an important application, every application that members don't turn up, and that wasn't the first application that we've been, a site meeting with only 4 members turn up. We're going to have every site meeting, or it's going to be requested every time that, only 3, 4, 5 turn up. Now, what if we call another site meeting and only 4 turn up to that because of people's work commitments? And we get out, we're planning up the applicant and everybody that was at the site meeting. Because it is important that if that's the next site meeting, then that becomes the precedent of the last site meeting. All the questions that are asked are gone because we've got 4 more turn up over and above the 4 turn. They've got all different information. So whoever turns up really ought to restart that meeting completely again. And I think because of our bad attendance at that meeting, I don't think we should be calling for another site meeting.
Sorry, can I make a point? And I'm going to be really brief. I'm going to be really brief.
I will take advice from officers on this. Ultimately,
I have been on this committee where we have deferred applications for a further site visit because we felt we couldn't make a decision. And I feel in this application, it's 160 houses. It's a huge application with a massive impact. So I think we should at least look into that if we may, Chairman. Thank you.
I will, as I say, be in discussion with
Chairman, I think that might have been because we were lacking information. In this instance, there's no reason at all with going to planning or policy or drawings or information or the report that is missing. It's just the fact that people didn't turn up.
I agree with
Councillor Culver.
Say is I know in the past when you have site visit, they've done so-called drive. So if you got a development where it's an extension of the house. This is a gated area. Makes it very, very limited. So this particular instance, very much.
Councillor Cole, that's noted.
The other thing I would say is,
gonna
if we
wrap this up.
defer this, Chairman, if
Councillor Hook is wrong.
Yeah, okay.
I said I got one. I said I got one.
Okay, members, thank
I said I
you.
got one.
We've got very limited time left
And I-
this evening.
Chairman, I'll take advice, but if this is deferred, I mean, could this go then to possibly the inspector for non-determination?
Councillor Hooker, this I'll take advice from officers. This will go to committee at the first available opportunity. We're looking, I think, at the 12th of January, and officers will be making an ultimate decision as to whether we go with another site visit or not.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I think that matter can be discussed outside of this meeting.
Okay, and I'm going to wrap that up there, and we're going to move on to Mr. Masiwa's presentation of the second application this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll just share my screen. All right, thank you. Members, we do have an update sheet for this second item as well. It relates to, it's a very brief one. We received an additional letter of objection on the application, and the points raised is that the proposal was higher than the existing buildings and would invade adjacent properties' privacy, and that's outlined in the update sheet. Members, this application seeks full planning permission for the demolition of an existing former care home and garages and the construction of 8 new residential units. The proposal put forward will deliver 6 2-bedroomed houses and 2 3-bedroomed houses. It is proposed that all the dwellings will be delivered as affordable housing, and they would be in accordance with policy CS6 of the core strategy. The application is submitted by Homes for West Berkshire, which is a joint partnership between West Berkshire Council and Sovereign Housing. Parking is provided within the plots, and additional parking is provided within the area where the demolition is taking place. There are no objections from statutory consultees, and conditions are recommended within the report. The reason the application was called in, the ward member sought for the committee to decide whether the council's policies on the climate emergency were complied with on their own application. As indicated, Mr. Chairman, in the report, officers are recommending approval subject to the schedule of conditions and the completion of a Section 106 legal agreement, which will secure 2 units, 1 by a 2-bedroom unit and 1 by 3-bedroom unit, in compliance with policy CS6. As shown on the plan, the site comprises a former care home owned by West Berkshire Council, which has been vacant for some time. And it also includes 4 garages owned by Sovereign Housing. The garages are located here. These are the 4 garages owned by Sovereign, and this is the outline of the care home to be demolished. There is sufficient distance, members, between the proposed dwellings and the rear elevations of the adjacent properties at Priory Avenue. This has been one of the points raised in objection But as you can see with the measurements on the plans, there is more than 21 meters from wall to wall in terms of separation between the proposed dwellings and those existing to the west. This is in compliance with the council's guidance on separation distances between residential properties. The dwellings have been designed such that their layout, size, scale does not appear out of context in relation to adjacent properties. As we can see from the proposed street scene, these are existing sovereign housing flats. As we can see, the proposed scheme with houses further on Cold Harbour Lane. The proposed facades, architectural detailing and heights are in keeping with the height of the nearest dwellings on the adjacent roads. And officers consider that the proposals will merge well with the existing dwellings and the layouts and gaps between the buildings and plot sizes are also considered to be acceptable. Members, your officers consider that the evidence of the need for affordable housing is up to date, and officers consider that the submitted proposal and approach put forward will comply with policy CS6 of the core strategy and is therefore acceptable. Policy CS6 allows for 20% provision of affordable housing on sites of 5 to 9 dwellings. The applicant is proposing 25%, which is above the 20% required by the policy. In addition, the applicant is willing to complete a Section 106 legal agreement, which doesn't affect the provision of the whole scheme being put forward and delivered as affordable housing. The proposed boundary treatment is in the form of 1.8 meter high close bordered fence. As you can see on this plan, there are some trees that are being removed. The tree officer has considered the application and is satisfied that the trees are not of value and they can be removed. There are a proposal for smaller trees within the rear gardens as indicated on the plan. I'll just go through the site photographs just again for members' benefits. This is a view from Chestnut Walk looking north towards the existing garages. So these are the 4 garages to be demolished, and this is the old care home. The lamp posts will be relocated as indicated in the report. These are the existing dwellings adjacent to the property, similar in scale to those proposed. Another view of the care home building to be demolished. And these are some of the trees that are being removed. As you can see, they are of little value. This is the rear of the care home. There's an existing path with the right of access to one of the properties. This is being retained, so this will be the boundary for the new properties. Just an indication of the existing boundary to the properties to the west, which is Priory Avenue. And again, a photograph indicating the separation distance of those properties on Priory Avenue to the boundary, which as indicated is considered to be sufficient and won't be impacted greatly by the new development. And that ends the presentation, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Mr. Masiwa, thank you very much. I'll move now to Mr. Goddard. Observations from a highway point of view, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Highways have no objection to this proposal before you. The only point that we did have was the 2 3-bed dwellings requires 2.5 spaces according to policy P1, rounded up to 3. And those last 3 spaces are provided on the entrance to the site. So some distance away from the particular dwellings, but they have still got the other 2 required parking spaces right within the curtilage. It's not ideal, those spaces being some distance away, but I don't think it's enough for us to recommend refusal. So on that basis, the proposal complies with your parking standards and other standards and should not cause any negative traffic impact. Therefore, we recommend approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Goddard. We now move on to our speakers, and we have Councillor John Down from Hungerford Town Council. Mrs. Gill, would you be good enough to invite Councillor Down to the meeting? Thank you. Mr. Down, can you hear us? You're currently muted.
Thought it would all be automatic.
And if we could see you, it would be better still.
Oh,
good evening. Nice to see you. Sorry it's taken so long to get round to doing a piece this evening. John,
well, it's been great entertainment.
Thank you very much. If you haven't picked up by now, you've got 5 minutes to address the committee. I'll start the clock when you do. I'll let you know when you've had 4 of those minutes and 10 seconds to wind up.
Okay. Thank you, Chairman. Good evening, Western Area Planning Committee members. I'm here representing Hungerford Town Council. The Town Council has taken a great deal of interest in this application over the last year. Firstly, we're very keen to see the long derelict and unsightly care home site used and improved. And secondly, additional affordable homes are much needed in the town, and the prospect of an additional 8 modestly sized homes is very welcome. So we did have some initial issues with the appearance of the homes and the number of parking spaces, and to some extent with sustainability. But those are now resolved, and strictly on perhaps planning policy, although I won't get into that area, I'm not sure that we have some objections to this. However, we would like to record at this meeting that in our discussions with Homes for West Berkshire, the joint venture partners, Sovereign Homes and West Berkshire Council, as you know, we have been repeatedly assured that it is in both parties' intention that these homes will be constructed and provided with heating systems that will be the standards set out in the government's future home standards due for 2025. We understand that this may require the primary landowner, i.e. West Berkshire Council, to accept a slightly lower land value for their site to make that happen. It would appear to us in Hungerford Town Council that not achieving that level of standard for these homes built on West Berkshire Council's own land would represent a serious inconsistency and incur possible accusations of hypocrisy when compared with the council's own climate emergency declaration and environment strategy objectives. We appreciate that this is essentially a financial aspect for the council, perhaps not in the remit of this planning committee, but we trust that the council members here will themselves want to see the council actually walk the talk of being seen to be wholeheartedly addressing the climate change challenge. So by doing so, we think that West Berkshire Council and Sovereign Homes, obviously, would be able to create an exemplary, sustainable housing showpiece in Hungerford to illustrate to other developers, commercial developers, what they could and should also be doing, starting now, not waiting. Even more importantly, and particularly with today's energy prices, West Berkshire Council will be helping to provide the eventual occupants of these homes with not just affordable homes to rent or part buy, but also homes which are actually truly affordable to run and heat. And we would like this consideration to be given proper focus. As a last point, can we make a plea that the electric vehicle charging points to be included with these homes have their power supplied, this may be a detailed point, but have their power supplied from the consumer units of the occupants' homes. This is important because if they're handed over to some commercial third-party provider, the rates that these occupants will be paying for charging their electric vehicles will be significantly higher than if they'd come off their own electricity supply. So I think it should be an absolute basic condition in any new development that that should be the case. So I'd just like to thank the committee for their time and for their entertainment this evening, and hope that you'll ensure that this development proceeds in the way that I suspect most of you know it really should. Thank you.
Councillor Down, thank you very much. Members, any questions, please, of John Down? John, I think it looks as though you've got off scot-free, so. No, I'm going to go to Councillor Vickers.
Just to be clear, Councillor Down, you're asking this committee to insist on a standard of sustainable energy, generally sustainable build that is considerably better than policy requires us to produce. Is that right?
That's correct. I think the West Berkshire Council would wish to show the example to the people building in their district. And I think to do anything else would be poor, frankly.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Members, no further questions. John, thank you very much indeed.
Okay, thank you.
Enjoy your cocoa.
Chairman, before we go on, would it be worth Mr. Till giving us an explanation on that?
Mr. Till, would you like to come in?
Well, Chairman, it would seem more appropriate for the questions to officers, but I can provide a explanation and policy. As I say, I think it would be better posed as a question.
We'll broach it down, I think. Thank you very much. Thank you, Councillor Hooker. Ward members, Councillor Cole.
Thank you, Chairman. As ward councillors, we've seen attitudes to this planning application develop over time. It's been going for a while. We've been involved in discussions with Hungerford Town Council, with Sovereign as representative of the applicant joint venture, and we've seen the planning reasons for objection gradually dissipate to the point where I attempted to withdraw the call-in to avoid wasting council and therefore public money on site visits and a planning meeting, only to be told once again that I could not do so. I have requested, Chairman, that we urgently find a means of permitting withdrawal. If we fail to do so, we risk failing to encourage ward councillors to do their duty to help with planning applications where permitted, and we risk wasting public money. I'm sure that all three of us entirely support Hungerford Town Council's plea as to heating standards. I argue it's also now a requirement that we comply with our own social value policy, and I've requested to put a brief urgent question on this to Executive tomorrow. But this is not a planning subject for this evening under current planning laws, which is why I'm putting it to the Executive. Councillor Down's request in respect of powering EV charge points, on the other hand, is an interesting one. Have we seen that before? I rather agree with him. It seems reasonable to suggest this should become standard where possible. Obviously, there can be an issue where parking places are allocated and not allocated, but I'm sure that that could be looked at, and I've no doubt that our planning officers can comment on that. I don't really want to say any more until we get to the debate. that I will have a question for planners on affordable housing numbers.
Thank you, Councillor Cole. Are you done?
Sorry,
I
think we've got a little bit more time. Can I just add just one comment to that? I think I'd just like to thank, for the record, Hungerford Town Council for raising this, albeit we might not be able to consider it as a strict planning issue, because it's good that they're pushing the boundary and the climate emergency. So I welcome their input and their engagement. Thank you.
That's all. Members, questions of the ward members? No? Okay, we're going to go on now to questions of clarification of officers, please. And I've got Councillor Vickers to start off.
Well, it's really that question, because I read the report, I read the reason for calling, and I thought, well, what's the problem? It's meeting policy. But now I've heard from the town council, I understand that really they want to exceed policy. And I must agree with the views of the town council that we should, having declared a climate emergency, if it's possible.
Alan, and your question?
I'm sure we can't. I mean, it's a question of planning law, really. What is the law that says we cannot at least ask the applicant, which in this case is sort of ourselves, if we can actually become an exemplar on this side?
Thank you, Chairman. The underpinning principles of planning law and planning guidance are that the development framework is followed and the policies of the local development framework and the MPPF. It is a laudable aim to exceed the requirements of building regulations, for example, in terms of addressing sustainable energy. It's a laudable aim and it's for the applicant to offer. But in terms of policy, we as the local planning authority need to adhere to the policies that we have and to insist on compliance with a level that is meeting with those policies, but we can't start imposing additional recommendations to exceed those policies. That is purely up to the applicant. So the applicant may take away from this meeting comments that members have made and decide to look again at their energy strategy. But it is not for the local planning authority to impose conditions that exceed the requirements of policy, or if we do so, then we may very well be held to an appeal, and that would be unfortunate in this particular case, but in any case where the local planning authority is exceeding its duties. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Till. I'm going to go to Councillor Culver, please.
Thank you, Chairman. We've had some updates tonight to the other two applications regarding the council's advice we've had about CS15. Do I assume that we haven't added that to the update sheet for this application because it's not a major development? And secondly, I know with the Compton application, the Compton NDP has required that all new residential development should achieve a 19% improvement on carbon emissions. So that's over and above the building regulations target. So Mr. Till has said that we can't ask applicants to do that, they have to offer to do that. But why is it that an NDP is able to require that, but the local planning authority is not able to require that additional effort?
So, yeah, I think the second part of that is the subject for another day, possibly.
Well, I can answer and reasonably briefly that that an NDP is a policy document and enables the local parish council to bring forward their own raft of policies that sit alongside our local plan policies and have due weight in accordance with that. In respect, sorry, would you mind repeating the other aspect of the question,
Yes, Mr.
Councillor
Till.
Gold?
Yeah, with the other two update sheets, we've had council's advice about CS15, but it wasn't on the update sheet for this particular application. Is that because this isn't a major application?
Thank you, Councillor Culver. In respect to the other two applications, the position on CS15 was slightly more complicated, and I felt merited an explanation for members. In this particular case, nothing changes. It's the advice I've been giving members, and there's nothing to flesh that out. It's simply that the policy in respect of minor residential development is out of date, and the Code for Sustainable Homes has been kicked into touch by the government and replaced by parts of the building regs. So there is no way for us to seek zero carbon measures through policy CS15 for minor residential development. Thank you, Councillor Culver.
Thank you very much. I had Councillor Hooker, but are you out, Councillor Hooker? Okay, thank you. Councillor Rolls.
Yeah, just a quick question for Mr. Goddard, actually, as parking's been such a hot potato tonight, I thought I'd continue the theme. My understanding is there's going to be 4 garages demolished and 4 retained, which are private and nothing to do with this development. So there's going to be car parking spaces away from the houses. My question is, with visitors, for example, in quite a sort of narrow access, because it is quite a sort of narrow road when you pull in, if you have on-street parking with visitors, etc., do you envisage any issues with that, Mr. Goddard?
It's a good question. The difficulty is that our parking standards for houses don't include visitor parking. So I can't really ask for any. However, I would imagine that some of the parking, the 5 bays on the entrance to the site could perhaps be used by visitors because they are more of an unallocated nature. Sorry, that's not much to go on, but I hope that answers the question as best I can.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I move to Councillor Abs, please.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chairman. A quick check. I wasn't able to find any in the documentation, but is there a management company handling any common land involved in this application?
Mr. Masiwa?
There is no management land or management company handling any of the site area. There is an area shown just in front of the garages to be demolished, which is owned. The area is owned by Sovereign Housing. But the owners of the private garages that are being retained have got a right of access. That's why that area is being left undeveloped.
So basically, Sovereign Housing is the freeholder on this land.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Cole next.
I think West Berkshire is the freeholder on the main site, but not on the parking bit, if I remember rightly. I had a couple of minor things. That interesting aspect, to me at least, of powering charge points. Do we yet have, Mr. Goddard, a policy on this?
Chairman, good question. And I thank Councillor Downs from Hungerford for raising this issue. We don't at the moment, although I support the provision that the charge and the cost comes from the curtilage rather than some company. You know, our whole aim here is to make it as cheap and easy as possible for people to use electric vehicles and their charging points. The condition that you have before you is that the details would be submitted. So we could pick this point up. What I would also say is that colleagues in transport policy are drawing up electric vehicle charging point guidance that will give specific numbers per how many charging points you need for certain uses. And I will do is I'll take this point away and ensure and ask if this particular point of having charging from the curtilage rather than a company is covered within the policy. I imagine at some point the policy will come to the Transport Advisory Group. So I will certainly take this point away. Thank you.
Thank you. My other question is for planners. Well, the original document refers that all of the dwellings will be delivered as affordable housing. And yet we're talking about 25% or whatever the percentage was. And I get the impression that we have a means of possibly making it up to 100%. How does this actually work?
Who'd like to pick that up?
Yes, thank you, Councillor Cole. Yes, the entire scheme, all the 8 dwellings will be delivered as affordable, and that's been put forward by the applicant, Homes for West Berkshire. They've also the requirement of policy CS6, which applies to all residential developments, regardless of whether it's open market or affordable housing, where there has to be provision for affordable housing in terms of that policy secured via Section 106 legal agreement. And the terms of reference of the council. The applicant was willing to put forward the 25% to meet policy CS6. They have secured grant funding from Homes England to deliver the 8 affordable housing on the site. And they considered that entering into a Section 106 wouldn't affect the grant funding. So they were happy to proceed with that arrangement. I would suspect that the registered provider for the 2 units secured by Section 106 would be Sovereign Housing still as well.
But it's a means of the grant funding, that's what we're actually talking about. As long as it ends up as 8 affordable houses, that's fine by me.
Yes, it will end up as 100% affordable housing.
Great.
Thank you very much, Mr. Msuwa. I've now got Councillor Hooker.
Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Masawi, my questions are regarding the garages. As we can see, 4 are being knocked down. The other 2 being retained, as I understand it, belong to Thames Valley Police. As a part of this contract and change of use in loose terms, can you confirm that as a part of the taking down of 4 garages, the 2 remaining will be made good and watertight? We're not going to get into some problems with the ownership of those. The right of way is recorded across what is sovereign land onto what isn't sovereign land, which is existing at the moment, make sure it's in the contract. And also, can we ensure that now that it's not a residential home, but social housing, we put something in place there to ensure that there's no obstruction of those garages or the access to them?
Chairman,
Yes.
if I may come back on that question. The right of way is a matter of land ownership, civil law. It's not for planning. The walls of the garages, that would be covered under Land Conveyancing Party Wall Act. So again, not for planning. But there are legal requirements outside of planning for rights of way to be secured and for the walls, etc., to be made good. They just can't be covered off in planning terms. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. It's just a matter of obstruction as well now.
of
It's
the
going to be social
garages.
of the
Of
Thames
the
Valley
parking.
Police garages and access to it. Yeah, the garage doors.
Mr. Till, do you want to touch on that?
Again, you would be talking a matter that comes down to the rights of way agreements that exist between the landowners concerned.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Vickers.
Well, okay, I'd actually put my hand
I
out.
do
found the
apologise.
Policy, but I wasn't clear about Councillor Cole's question because I thought he was asking whether we have a policy that insists on electric charging points, which we do, and I've just found it. So what is missing out of that policy, which in Roman numerals 8 says we have to have EV charging points on every new dwelling? And indeed,
How you power them.
lots of applications.
How you power them was the interest.
How it's paid for, or how you,
Therefore, how it's paid for.
right,
We're talking
I
social
they
housing
have
here.
to be on the curtilage, yes.
Okay.
Except for flats, where of course you don't have a, you say, as you said, unless it's an allocated.
I'll move that on. I've got Councillor Culver then, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I think it's welcome that all of these units are going to be affordable, and it's good to see this joint venture coming forward. Can I just ask whether any of these are going to be social rent? Because the word affordable is often bandied around and it actually isn't that affordable for people, whereas social rent would be.
Mr. Masiwa.
Thank you, Councillor Culver. Yes, from the proposal put forward by the applicant, they are going to split them, yes, social rent 50%, 50-50, with intermediate as well.
Thank you very much. Right, members, I'm mindful of the time. We've got 10 minutes left before this meeting closes. I'm going to open this up now for debate. I'll have someone to open that, please. Councillor Culver, are you coming straight in? That's a legacy hand. Councillor Abs.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. To be honest, this seems a very easy one to go with officer recommendation in my eyes. It ticks an awful lot of the right boxes in one of the right locations. So very little to debate in my head. I love the fact that we've picked up on the cost of charging points, and I won't hark back to our own charging regime at this meeting, but it is important, the cost, the kilowatt hour cost of charging your EV vehicle, be it new or second hand. So really pleased if that can be conditioned or is in fact just accepted as what will happen now. So if we want to debate it, great. Otherwise, I'm quite happy to propose that we accept officer recommendation.
I'll leave that there for the moment. Councillor Barnett.
Well, Chairman, without prolonging things.
Thank you, Councillor Barnett.
We've had a discussion tonight about site visits, and this was a typical example where I was not too happy in actually going on the site. In fact, it quite upset me because this was one of the flagship projects of this homes when I was the chair, when I was the adult services executive member, and it was a good care home. So it's the first time I went there since it closed. So I was a little bit upset. But having said that, I think it does tick all the boxes, as the proposal said. And if we're looking for a second, I'm more than happy in seconding it.
Thank you very much. And I'll keep that one in the back pocket. I'll go to Councillor Vickers, please.
Just a quickie. I mean, picking up on Councillor Downs' points, and I think the feeling is that we all sympathise with it. Whilst I accept we can't ask for it formally and demand it be a condition, can we perhaps put it in the minutes or as an informative on the decision notice that members would wish this to be looked at? Otherwise, I would certainly be voting for this.
Mr. Till.
Thank you, Chairman. We can certainly minute that members raise concerns in respect of the level of carbon reduction technology. But I'd also like to just briefly return to the concerns regarding the source of electricity, if I may. I have some concern, Chairman, that this is actually exceeding the requirements of policy again, that our policy doesn't specify that we can pick between providers. So while we can add an informative that members have expressed an interest that the applicant explore these options, we can't put anything prescriptive within the conditions regarding it, in my view, Chairman.
Thank you for your guidance there, Mr. Till. Councillor Rolls.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Sorry, actually, I was going to make that point that to try and sort of push that piece, but obviously that's been answered by Mr. Till, so I'm grateful for that. I'm not going to add any more. I'm not going to repeat, but you know, this is a very much welcomed, I think, amongst all of us as ward colleagues. It's a bit of an eyesore, and it ticks a lot of boxes, as we said. So that's what I was going to say. Thank you.
Councillor Rolls, and I've got Councillor Vickers, hopefully to wind us up.
I mean, the reasoning, I think, which again should be limited, is that, you know, when we're talking about social housing or housing that we are going to be, in a sense, the landlord for, I think we have a duty of care to keep the cost of living of occupants to a minimum. And that is why I think that's the justification for going for better than the minimum, better than policy, because we have an ongoing responsibility to keep the bills of those occupants as low as possible. And that's, I think, a reason that should be in the minutes.
Thank you, Councillor Vickers. Again, Mr. Till, that is an advisory we can put on the...
I would suggest that in that particular case that Councillor Vickers' concerns are minuted rather than an informative slide.
Thank you very much. Before I put this to the vote, I do apologise. Councillor Cole?
Just to reiterate that is the subject of the question that I'm hoping to put to Executive tomorrow, if the leader should agree to accept it. It's defined as an urgent question, so she has the choice to say no.
Before I put this to the vote, members, I'd just like to add that as a fellow ward member, I'm very happy to see this come before this committee. There's a lot to like about it, in my view, and it'll also get a lot of the near neighbours off my back asking when this is ultimately going to be redeveloped. So I'm very pleased to see it hopefully find favour with this committee. I've had a proposer. Please remind me who that was. Councillor Abbs, and was it Councillor Barnett seconding? It was. Before I put it to the vote, do we have any conditions or advisories?
Thank you, Chairman. I have an informative regarding the expiration of the electricity source in addition to the details of electric charging points that are stipulated under the requirements of condition. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Till. So again, mentioned the propose and seconder of acceptance of officer recommendation. I'll take a show of hands, members, please. And that, it's a good way to end the year, is unanimous. Thank you very much. Members, if you just remain seated for the time being until we close the Zoom meeting. Before we do finish, I'd like to thank all of you members and officers alike for your contributions throughout what's been a challenging year. I wish you all and your families a very Merry Christmas and the very best for 2022. Thank you, everyone. Please remember to clear and disinfect your own desks before leaving and wear a face covering when you move around the room. Thank you and good night and sleep well.